Alright, so we're going to jump backwards a little bit. I know I ended the last video with number 125, and I had originally just intended to feature these in my final video on my various James Bond titles, but since these are actually Criterions and they're very famous Criterion Laserdisc, I'm just going to include them here. I forgot that the first one is actually Spine 124, so we're going to jump back a number and start this off with that edition, which is the full CAV special edition of Dr. No. Now, these versions of the first three Bond films came out on Criterion and are very well known for having their original CAV versions with a audio commentary track with the various members of the original crew, particularly director Terrence Young, Guy Hamilton, who directed Goldfinger, editor Peter Hunt, screenwriter Richard Maybaum, and others. And they're very candid, wonderful listens. But later on, when Cubby Broccoli heard that they had done these, this was still in the early days of commentaries, so they just they were afraid that they were a little too forthcoming, essentially, and so they were Criterion was asked to remove them, and they did on the CLV versions and stopped making the CAV editions. At first, they offered people the chance to buy a copy of the commentary tracks on cassette tape, but that was eventually nixed too. I don't know if any of those actually made it out. But anyway, that's why these discs are well known and why they're very valuable and why many people try to collect them. It took me a long time to get all three. But as far as the disc and transfer, the cover's pretty nice. I like how they commissioned an artist to redraw one of the original promotional images for the film, and it looks quite nice with this off blue. They used the original typeface of the title from the opening titles, just rendered in black. And here you have some images from the film. It's a nice looking jacket that MGM pretty much replicated on several of their tape and Laserdisc released jackets, just kind of moved around with a different background. And you get the Criterion banner across the top. If you're looking for this version on eBay or anywhere online, the way you can tell the CAV from the CLV, if you just see the front cover image, the CAV version has the Criterion bar, and then the CLV reissue just has the Criterion banner across the entire top. So that's how you're able to tell if it doesn't say if it's one disc or two, or if you just see the front cover image. The gatefold is wonderful, using the original gun barrel with various images from the film kind of dotted along. It does have a very Maurice Binder feel to it, who also did a lot of the film's trailers. And if you look over here, this particular grab is from the actual theatrical trailer itself, which is, giving fanfare to the fact that this is the first time one of Fleming's novels has jumped off the page onto the screen. And what's nice about the stills is that they are authentic vintage ones and have really nice color to them. Now, that's the interesting thing about this transfer is it's framed at about 1.75 to 1. The first three Bond films were shot flat, and they were designed for the British ratio of 1.66 to 1, but would have been shown here in the States anywhere up to about 1.85 to 1. For the first three, they play much better 1.66, and it took quite some time for them to get that way. They were usually presented in a opened up or cropped from the negative 1.33 on home video, but pretty much all prints that I've seen are hard matted to somewhere around 1.6 or 1.7. So that's how they're intended to be shown, and this was the first home video release to really do that. And Terrence Young himself signed off on the Dr. No and For Much With Love Criterion releases as finally being good, authentic transfers of the films that he himself favored. Now, the rear cover is the standard Criterion style. You get a really, really nice essay, as per usual. The special features include the original trailer, the aforementioned commentary track that caused all the trouble. You get a isolated music and effects track as well on the other analog channel, which is a nice touch because this film's score has never officially been released. The soundtrack releases are a mixture of the infamous theme, island and calypso music, and incidental pieces, only some of which actually appear in the film. So Monty Norman's actual soundtrack is still to this day unreleased. So it's really nice to have that if you're a fan of the score, as I am. In addition, you get a really nice supplemental text section full of rare stills, really nice production material, a lot of which has been covered by the various documentaries and books about Bond that have come out since. So you'll probably be able to see a lot of this stuff in other forms later on, but for the time when this came out, this was most people's first brush with a lot of this stuff, if they weren't complete Bond nerds who had read things like the James Bond Bedside Companion by Raymond Benson, or the Stephen J. Rubin's Bond Movie Encyclopedia. So it's actually still a really nice section, and they put a good amount of effort into it, which you can always tell. Sometimes Criterion sections can be small with just a couple frames, and sometimes they're pretty stacked like all their Bond releases are. Now, unfortunately, what they did with the CAV Bonds is they did this thing where they started putting some of the supplementals at the end of sides. So as you're watching the movie, you're going to have to know to skip or stop the disc before it goes into a supplemental section. Here it just has one. It has an old 60s commercial at the end of side 2. So I don't know why they did this. But thankfully the CLV versions don't have that, and thankfully they realized this was a mistake and really interrupts the flow of the film. So you'll have to be aware of that. Here it's just one interruption. I think Goldfinger has 2, but still that's the only downside to this release. You do get the film's original mono as PCM, which is great, and this transfer is really nice because it's really the closest you're going to get on home video to seeing an original dye transfer Technicolor release print. I've seen Dr. No in dye transfer, and it's absolutely staggering, and you know, as cleaned up looking and pristine looking as the Lowry Digital 2006 scan and restoration is, which I've seen both digitally and on film and on Blu-ray, of course. I'm really not a fan of the color timing, and there's been some talk that they degrained the image and just added in some like a grain plate to give some semblance of film grain being put back. And for me, I really just gravitate towards either the Criterion or the MGM letterbox versions, because they use the same source print. They have the same damage marks. They're almost identical. The MGM one is a bit sharper, the color's a little bit different, and it's a bit brighter. It is a CLV encoding though, as opposed to this being CAV, because that disc was put out first in the Connery Collection box set and then was reissued on its own as a standalone. So this Criterion version is really nice. I would say it's on par with the MGM letterboxed issue. They both have great sounding mono, and both are as close as you can get to seeing a dye transfer release print. And they look pretty much the same because they are the same source print. There's not a whole lot of difference. So this one you get the benefit of having CAV, and you get the nice supplementals, although it does interrupt the flow of the film on side 2. But still an essential Criterion release, a famous one, highly recommended, and perfect to see the film untouched and unmolested. Here we have 124A, the CLV release. Pretty much exactly the same. Of course, you see the Criterion banner is across the entire top, so that's how you can tell the difference on the front jacket. The rear looks almost identical. They've added a photo here, and the typeface is different, and the about the transfer is placed up here. They kind of shuffled everything around because they didn't have to have the extra space for the features, which have been all removed. So this is just the movie, and it does not have the commercial shoved in on side 2 because it's just a single 2-sided disc. So I didn't intend to pick this up, it just came in a lot, so I figured I'd just hang on to it just for having the other variation. And I'd like to pick up the CLV versions of the other 2 at some point, but I'm not going to, you know, spend a lot of money trying to track them down just to have the alternates. But if you want the Criterion version, or you want it without, you know, the supplemental shoved in the middle of the movie, you can pick this up. And they're usually very cheap because they go for a lot less than the CAV versions with the commentary and extras. Here we go with Spine 127. This is the classic Wages of Fear. Beautiful cover artwork. Just a simple grab from the film in black and white, but it looks fantastic. If you've never seen this film, absolutely do so. It was famously remade by William Friedkin as the film Sorcerer, which itself, even though it makes some changes and stuff, it's really a good film in its own right. But this one is just one of the great nail-biting suspense films, period. Show you the rear. No real special features or anything. This is just a standard movie-only release. Again, with Criterion picking up, it was really the first truly good release of the film here in the States. You get the film's original audio and PCM mono, so that's a great help. You get a nice SA as usual, and the film's spread across 3 sides. And the transfer on this is actually really nice. It's not as common a Criterion release to find, but it's not super rare or anything. So just a nice, solid, and beautifully packaged Criterion Laserdisc of a great foreign classic. Here is Spine 128, Jean Cocteau's Beauty and the Beast. This is the CAV version, which is pretty difficult to find. I found it locally, very surprisingly actually, so it's a little dinged up, but it does look really nice, I think. They kind of even rendered the typeface of the Criterion bar in a way to just kind of fit the old style of the typeface used for the title, and I think the image they chose really works well on the Laserdisc jacket. So it's just a really, really nice one. And it has a gatefold, which gives you the original poster, and then what looks like a storyboard or piece of art design, and then Cocteau's actual signature printed across the jacket, which is a really nice touch. And then a lovely quote there. So not a super busy gatefold in terms of being packed with info or something, but just a really nice looking one. And here you go with the standard Criterion style jacket. Nice SA. They've kind of gone with this kind of off gold color to kind of match the printing on the front. The black and white kind of is printed in a way that makes it look sort of this, with this sort of golden cast to it, so it kind of carries over onto the back. You do get a commentary, a small documentary, and then the usual big supplementary section filled with photos, stills, and behind the scenes information. So again, a nice release. I'm pretty sure all this stuff carried over to when Criterion put this out on DVD, but of course you lose having the PCM mono because it drops down to lossy Dolby Digital. Usually you find the CLV version, so this CAV version can get a little bit on the pricey side, because anytime that it's already harder to find Criterion and then you try to find the full CAV version, it's usually going to cost you a bit more. So I would definitely recommend it, especially if you've never seen the film or you're only used to the far inferior Disney version. But you know, you can pick it up on DVD, the Criterion DVD, for usually a bit less. So just, if you're really wanting this, definitely seek it out. If you find it, grab it, you'll love it. But you're probably going to save a lot of money by getting the CLV version. But still, it's nice to actually get the full CAV treatment with the extras when you can. Moving on to spine number 131. Of course, we have the CAV special edition of From Russia with Love. Pretty much similar design to Dr. No, except they've gone with a purple background, and this cover image may be familiar. This was also used on, again, some of the MGM discs and videotapes around this time period, kind of moved around and with different images. So I guess Criterion kind of instigated this design scheme, and MGM just kind of borrowed it for their releases. It's a little dinged up, but it was the one I was missing for a long time. For some reason, this is usually the hardest one of the 3 to find the CAV version of. Again, I don't know particularly why, but I usually come across Dr. No and Goldfinger much more often. So I got it for a good price, so I didn't mind it being a little dinged up, but I'd like to, you know, have a pristine one at some point. Now the gatefold is really, really nice, just like Dr. No. Uses the central image from the boat chase, and it's kind of desaturated a bit to really give it some pop. And across the center you have an original foreign poster, some grabs from publicity stills, and then here across the side you have one of the original lobby door posters that was actually hung in the theater lobby on the door or on the wall vertically. for the premiere. If I remember correctly, these were each on a door, so it was actually a collection of 4 door posters that ran along the entire door. You can see some of these in the various Bond poster books. They pretty much did this for, I think, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball, the ones that had the really big premiere engagements in Britain. So it's a really nice touch. So here, similar background, no room for adding any photos, but you get a nice essay, this time by Stephen J. Rubin, whose encyclopedia is a must-read. And you get the special features breakdown, which has, yet again, another commentary that was removed for the CLV release. The supplemental section is rather coyly titled The Spectre File, which is just a nice touch, shows you how much care they put into this. So it's jam-packed with stills, production information, behind-the-scenes information, the original trailer, and again, all of this stuff has pretty much been replicated in various books and supplemental sections on the DVDs and such since it came out. But it's really nice to see, you know, its first appearance, and when it's done with a lot of care, I just get a kick out of seeing this stuff. Of course, the film is presented in widescreen. I think this was, again, the first time it was shown widescreen on home video. Again, pretty much every other release was done in a 1:3:3, either opened up or kind of appended scan from the original negative, from the original image. Now, thankfully with this one, they don't have any of the supplementals crammed into the end of the side. It's all saved for the very end. I just wish they had done that for all 3, so this is the only one of the 3 that escapes that, so you can just watch the film straight through. As far as the transfer is concerned, it's got nice color, has the original mono mix in PCM. It does not have an isolated score track like Dr. No and Goldfinger does, but if you pick up the MGM Connery Collection or the For Much With Love standalone CLV disc, it's not credited, but it actually does have an isolated music and effects track on the analog track for that release. So you can actually pick that up if you want to get the isolated music and effects track. Also, when you compare this to the MGM releases, this transfer uses the same source print as the old open matte MGM Laserdisc, but the Connery Collection disc, which was MGM's first letterbox release of From Russia with Love, uses either a cleaned up version of this same print or a different print source. So I would say that the transfer is actually a bit stronger on the MGM release, even though it is CLV only. So the benefit to having this is that it's CAV and that, you know, it's widescreen, but the MGM disc I think is technically a little bit better. But the audio on that one noticeably has a lot of hiss in it. This one doesn't quite have as much hiss in the audio track, so that's another trade-off. I would suggest having both of them because they're both great. But that's just something to note, that the transfer is a little bit different comparing this and the eventual MGM letterbox release. So again, fantastic release, essential. Pick it up if you can, but if you can't find the CAV, the CLV will do you just fine. And if you're really interested in these commentaries, they've been preserved and you can find them online. They're all over the place. That's how I was first able to hear them before I was able to actually pick this up. So moving on to Spine 132, we of course have the Criterion Goldfinger Special Edition. Now here they use a similar cover design, except they've actually gone with the original promotional photo instead of having an artist render it. So I don't know why they did that. I don't know why they chose photo over artist or vice versa, but it's just a difference to note. Again, the CAV version will have the Criterion banner in a box, and the CLV will have it across the entire top. Interesting how they have the actual title of the film going downwards at a right angle. It's just a nice, interesting difference, I think. I think that's about the only time Criterion did that on a Laserdisc jacket. The gatefold is just like the others, very classy. Here you have the central image of the golden figure of a girl. I don't know, I think this is actually the image that was used on the poster that had Connery's face imposed here in the center, which I think was just a treated photo from the probably from the photo shoot where Mark Nolan was photographed for the opening titles in gold paint. At least that's what I would guess. Now you have some images from the film scattered across the bottom. Just a really nice, classy looking gatefold, just like the other two. in here, a simple jacket with a nice essay. Then the special features breakdown. Again, you get the audio commentary that was removed from the later edition, and then the original trailer, the isolated music and effects track on the other analog track. And interestingly enough, just like From Russia with Love, the supplemental section has the special title of the Goldfinger Vault. And when it gets to that point, it literally plays the moment in the film when the actual vault of Fort Knox opens. So that's just another really nice touch. Unfortunately, here they've put supplementals on the end of both side 2 and side 3, so the film gets interrupted twice. Again, I wish they had just put all that stuff at the end. So again, only From Russia with Love escapes having that happen. But you know, it's definitely watchable, and of course if you get the CLV version, you don't have that problem. Now, in terms of transfer, again, this was the first time Goldfinger was in widescreen on home video, as far as I'm aware, and it has the original mono mix in PCM, which is great. But what's really important about this release is it's a totally different source to all the MGM versions, and has color timing that's not on any other release. And I've never gotten to see a dye transfer print of this film, unfortunately, but I've seen various elements of 16mm frames from 16mm reduction prints and various trailers and such. And I have to say, it does look as if they transferred a dye transfer print for this. I wouldn't be surprised if they did, because I'm almost positive they did that for the Dr. No release, because it looks almost identical to what a dye transfer Dr. No looks like, and I've seen one of those. So I would say this is essential simply for the transfer being different. You'll notice right off the bat, if you compare it to any other MGM release, it's kind of colder, has a different color timing to it. Of course, it's framed at about 1.75, whereas the MGMs are kind of opened up a bit, almost to like a 1.55. So, and again, CIV encoding, whereas the MGM Connery Collection release is CLV. But later on, they did a big CAV THX mastered box set, which is the best technical presentation on Laserdisc, as they went back to original elements and things. But another thing they did was they snipped out a couple damaged frames, and those have been snipped out of the film ever since. So the only good release outside of tape and the older open matte laser discs for those missing frames are actually on this Criterion release. So the transfer is really interesting, historically important, I would say, and again, you get the film without being mucked around with, as it is on the newer Lowry master that drives me crazy. So I would say all three films are absolutely important to pick up on these Criterion editions, but if you're looking for the ones that are, you know, most technically essential, Goldfinger would be the most important. And the other thing I should mention is that the actual title song on the MGM releases has been replaced with the stereo mix from the soundtrack. The Criterion release is the only Laserdisc to have the original mono mix that was done for the film. So it's the film mix of the title song in mono as it was originally heard everywhere in 1964. And it wasn't until the 2006 Ultimate Edition DVD of the Lowry Master and eventually the Blu-ray that was put back in the lossy mono track. Unfortunately, that doesn't sound anywhere near as good as this or any of the other Laserdiscs, so that's another reason why the Goldfinger Criterion release is extraordinarily important. Here we go with spine number 134. This is the Criterion release of Knife in the Water, the classic Polanski film. Just a nice standard movie-only release. Beautiful whole cover image with a scene from the film. This is kind of more of when they were getting to what they would eventually land with their cover designs on Laserdisc. So pretty much akin to what the DVD cover looked like as well. Pretty straightforward release. Again, no special features, just a single CLV disc with the film's original mono. A nice a nice piece of material from Polanski himself. I believe it's from a, it's apparently from his autobiography. It's just an excerpt, which is nice that they chose that to print in here. But other than that, just a nice classic foreign film, finally treated right on Laserdisc here in the States. So wish it had some special features. You can find those on the later releases, but this is just a nice movie-only Criterion disc. Here we go, Spine 135, the Criterion release of Here Comes Mr. Jordan. Just a nice, actually I quite like this image. It's just a scene from the film. I think it may have actually also been a production publicity still, but it just looks really nice on the jacket. Of course it's black and white. I think this copy, it's kind of tinted on the top, or it's kind of faded a bit. I'm not sure which. But otherwise it's in good shape, and of course it's comparable to the Columbia release. I don't know, I think they may actually use the same transfer. The Columbia version just drops the extras from this. And here's the rear cover. You get a nice essay piece here, and it's pretty much just a movie only disc. It's credited as having an audio interview on the analog track, but it's pretty much kind of cut to where it's like a rough commentary. So it's pretty much just a commentary, and that's the special feature that this has over the Columbia disc. And again, you do get the actual Columbia RCA logo here, letting you know that it's one of theirs. And it was very common for Criterion and Columbia to share transfers. The Columbia Dr. Strangelove that came out after the Criterion, as well as the Columbia standalone release of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, both seem to use the exact same Criterion transfer, just be pressed without the extras. Anyway, you'll just want to pick this up if you come across it, or if you really want the Criterion version, or if you really want to hear the commentary. But a great 40s classic that very highly recommended, and gets at least a bit of extras from Criterion. Keeping in that same vein, we have Spine 136. This is Criterion release of Arsenic and Old Lace. Again, another 1940s classic that later had a release that time from MGM. Seems to be roughly the same. I haven't seen that disc, but I have seen the Warner Brothers DVD, which pretty much should be the same. And this particular transfer is a bit different than that. This has a little bit of print damage here and there, but nothing bad. It's actually a really nice black and white transfer, especially for Laserdisc. And you get this really nice cover that they have this stylized font here. It just really looks nice. And the actual Criterion banner, the letters are kind of gold colored as well to fit with the typeface, which is a nice touch. And it looks really nice across the Laserdisc banner. Now, the rear standard Criterion style with a nice essay. No special features on this release, just a single movie only CLV disc. And it's actually not too easy to find. It's not a super rare Criterion, but it's not a common one. And I think there are, for some reason, 2 print runs of this. If you go on the LDDB page for the film, I think it has 2 different catalog numbers for some reason. And then I think some of these were pressed by the DADC plant, so it can get a bit speckly or potentially have some rot, so you'll have to check for that. This copy plays totally fine, and it is from DADC, so it is possible to have a rot-free DADC pressing. But anyway, it's just a really nice release from Criterion of a great classic film that I don't think gets the love that it really deserves. And it's kind of an odd mix. It's a Capra film that doesn't exactly feel like a Capra film. It's an adaptation of the Broadway hit. And you get to see all of these actors, including Cary Grant, really just, let loose for a good period of time. So that alone is worth your 2 hours. So again, just a nice Criterion release. The mono sounds good in PCM as well. So I've watched this disc, thoroughly enjoyed it, and I would highly recommend you pick it up if you find it, or if you're a fan of the film, because it is a little bit different when compared to the DVD. And hopefully this gets a Blu-ray at some point. It really deserves one. But just a nice, straightforward Criterion release. Here we have Spine 139, which is the CIV box set version of The Last Picture Show. Not too common of a box set, but not rare. Usually you're going to find the CLV version, which is just a gatefold, if I'm remembering correctly. So I was very happy to find the box. I like the starkness of the image for the cover, and I like how it fills out the Laserdisc size with not only the width but the height, and giving you the starkness of the open sky, just like the film's poster did. So I think that was a nice touch for not going with the since they didn't go with the original poster artwork, they really made it work. And then they have the typeface here and this pink font, so it's very stark, and it really gives you the overbearing, very downtrodden quality of the film, which is really something else. Now you get a really wonderful essay here, and then it has a tiny note about the restoration that was done around this time period from Peter Bogdanovich himself. In a special feature, you get 7 minutes of additional footage that was reinstated after the theatrical release, and it wasn't originally there. It was intended to be there. It was cut out for various reasons beyond people's control. You also get the original trailer, the re-release trailer, and then bits of the original screen tests for the young cast, which is a really nice touch. Now you get audio interviews and the analog tracks. They're kind of edited together, so it's roughly, again, a commentary. It's just listed as audio interviews, and they're really impactful. Most of this stuff has been replicated. Sony did their own. Well, they were Columbia then. Columbia did their own Laserdisc, which didn't really have any features, and then the DVDs, and then Criterion got the rights back for Blu-ray, and it's included in their BBS Lost and Found box set, which is highly recommended, and that has additional features that aren't on here, and carries over, I think, pretty much everything from this. But it's nice to get it in its original CAV box set form. Of course, you get the film's original mono mix and PCM, which is great. So I first saw this film on DVD, and I actually really liked watching it on this set. It looked really nice for Laserdisc. The black and white really jumped out well, and the sound was fantastic, particularly all of the music source cues, which are very integral to the film itself. Now, the supplemental section is on side 5. The whole film runs just onto 5 sides, and you get this really nice, as usual, Criterion supplemental section with the text slides, the publicity stills, the stills from the film, and then all of the, you get the screen tests and the trailers kind of interspersed with all those. So it's a really nice set, and just the standard box style. I don't think this came with the letter. Yeah, this doesn't have the letter in it. Some box sets would have the letter from, signed by John Mulvaney and such. But yeah, it doesn't. But I'm not sure if this originally came with one. Not all of them did, but still a really nice release, and it's nice to have in the CAV box set form. Because most of the time you're just going to find the slimmed down CLV version. Speaking of always finding the slimmed down CLV or other versions, this is one that I wanted and tried to get for a very, very long time, so I'm very pleased that I can finally enjoy it. This is spine number 142. This is the CAV reissue of Citizen Kane. So this is the full special edition that replaces the original spine number 1, as originally in the silver series, and then later reprinted as the black cover. Now this uses an original poster beautifully on the jacket. I think this is probably the best cover the film's ever had on any home video format, because it's a vintage poster, it's done very well, and it blends perfectly with the Criterion banner, which has kind of been given this silvery gray quality instead of being the usual black. So just beautifully done. Very, very classy, and they've put it in a trifold, which can be a bit difficult to work with, but the printing quality is just beautiful. Now here is the information about the supplemental feature, which is the Legacy of Citizen Kane. This is still exclusive to this release. It's basically a bunch of contemporary and historical filmmakers talking about the influence Kane had on them, how important Kane is, and what it means to them, and what it means to film history as well. So if you're interested in this, you'll have to track down this CIV version. It's the only time this has ever been released. Unfortunately, when the film went back over, well, when Warner Brothers kept putting it out, they've never tried to license the Criterion extras, so I was really excited to finally see this. Here on the first panel, you have a beautiful moment from the film. If I'm seeing correctly, of course it's hard when you're looking upside down, but anyway, all of the images are beautifully printed. It's sort of a matte finish, so it's not glossy, but it just feels really nice and looks very classy. Here you have the production credits. Instead of normally, like they are on the back, they had to put them here because they were a bit longer due to the supplemental feature. Now, here on the center gatefold, you have the chapter listing, and it pretty much goes right over onto 5 sides because it is fully CAV encoded. And here on the third panel, you have one of the famous images of Kane and the land in the paper printing, which, if I remember correctly, this was all from a deleted scene. So every time you see pictures of Kane or Leland or the both of them standing on top of the printed and bundled newspapers, it's actually from a sequence that was actually cut out of the film. So here you have the making of a classic, the visual essay, which was done by Robert Carringer, who did all the extras on Magnificent Ambersons as well. This starts on side 5 and is pretty much the supplemental section with all the text slides and the video clips and the trailers and so on and so forth, and tons of production information, which you can't talk about Kane enough. And then going on to side 6 is where you get the documentary section. Now, on this section, you also have, they had so many interviews that they had to include some of them as just audio only. So you play the program, and then you have to replay sections and activate the analog tracks, and different people talking about different subjects are on each of the individual tracks. So the digital track will have one, the analog left will have one, and the analog right will have one. And here it's all broken down with who's talking about what for each chapter on each of the 3 audio tracks, which is really helpful. It's really nice to see that, you know, they had so many people that they wanted to get as much information in as they could. So here you get a nice essay, you get the listing of the features and then the credits, and they're kind of crammed up in here, so then they can put this whole section about the supplemental interview documentary section. And that's how you tell this apart from the CLV version of this, which doesn't have any of this. If I remember correctly, it's just a single disc with the same cover and rear. But if you're looking at photos online on eBay and such, trying to get the CAV version, if you look at the back cover photo, it'll just have the essay and these usual text boxes with the chapter listings, but this whole square about the supplemental feature will not be there. So if you see this on the back, you'll know you're looking at the full CAV version. As far as the transfer goes, it's absolutely excellent. It looks phenomenal. So I cannot highly recommend this enough. This is one of the premier Criterion titles. It's one of their best special editions. A lot of time and care and effort were put into this, and a lot of this stuff has not been carried over, that's for sure. So it's definitely a supplement to the Blu-ray set, which is also essential, and it's definitely my favorite version outside of the fantastic quality that they got on the Blu-ray from the negatives from the film scanned at 4K. So anyway, best version on Laserdisc hands down, really replaces the original Criterion issue. And it's just an incredible release, and I'm so glad that I was finally able to track one down. So absolutely recommended. Here we go with another loaded Criterion Special Edition in a trifold. This is Volume 144, the Criterion version of Adventures of Baron Munchausen, the much maligned but really quite striking Terry Gilliam picture that, you know, it's not exactly for everyone. But, you know, if you've seen films like his, like Time Bandits and Brazil, you'll know definitely what you're in for. This is a beautiful release that's just jam-packed with extras. You can tell that somebody at Criterion really loved this film. Just beautiful image selections. I like how that's rendered in black and white. It just really comes across nicely. Here in the inner panel, you have more wonderfully chosen stills with the chapter breakdowns. The film makes it onto 5 sides, and then side 5 and 6 as your supplemental section, which again is loaded with material, everything from deleted scenes to the usual text commentary slides, tons and tons and tons of stills. This is again one of the jam-packed Criterion editions. Here you have the production credits for this release as well. The inner gatefold is really nicely done. It's reproductions of some of the handbills from the performances that are in the film. They again underline the idea of, you know, performance versus reality that runs throughout the entire picture. And then this continues on over to the other side. And I presume if you have the CLV movie-only version of this, it's probably these two panels are what you got on the gatefold of that. I know most of the time you're going to find that, or the more common Columbia issue. And again, this was kind of a co-release because it has the Columbia logo credited on here. And I haven't seen that disc, but I would guess that it probably uses this same Criterion transfer or the same base and maybe make some tweaks here and there. The rear is pretty nice. It's got a lovely SA, but it's kind of done in more of the later 90s design where Criterion switched to doing the SA material across here and then having all the film technical information down here, which is much more modern looking and much more like what you would eventually get on DVD and Blu-ray rear covers. And here's the special feature breakdown, which has a Terry Gilliam audio commentary, which, if I remember correctly, is exclusive to this release. And it's a great, wonderful listen. I would highly recommend it. And then all of the extensive special features, documentary bits, bits of production footage, elements about materials that were either never shot or cut out of the film, and then the troubles with the studio and the cut of the film and how long it was and how it was really a financial failure. The transfer notes say that this was framed at 1.75 to 1 with the original Dolby Stereo surround track encoded as PCM. Sounds wonderful, far better than the 5.1 remixes on the DVD. The film's hit Blu-ray now, but it's a Columbia release and it's not made it back to Criterion yet, so all of these Laserdisc extras are still pretty much exclusive. You can find out a lot of this information if you read a bunch of books or you look at articles or you look at a few extras on the Columbia Blu-ray and such, but you're going to need this Criterion version for completion's sake and for all the exclusive extras. And it's a really nice transfer with good picture quality and a great Matrix surround track. So highly recommended. Yet another loaded Criterion Special Edition. This is when they were really starting to get the ball rolling and make all these editions they became known for. Spine 149 is another Terry Gilliam movie. This is the release of The Fisher King. Not as expansive as the Munchausen Special Edition, but a nice gatefold. I think there's a movie-only version as well. The really nice gatefold here, and as you see they actually have printed across the entire thing without having like a black background, which is nice that they had switched to that by this point in time. The film makes it onto 3 sides, and then you get a whole side 4 of supplements with some deleted scenes and more text commentary slides, promotional and film images, so on and so forth, and some of the original trailers, in addition to the, as always, color bars at the end. And the rear goes back to the standard Criterion layout on black, which looks quite nice. Get a good essay, and then the special features include the audio commentary, the trailer, and the deleted scenes, and so on and so forth. It's actually a really nice release. Most of the time you'll just find the CLV version, which doesn't have any special features. And again, this disc is a mixture. Its first disc is CLV, and then the second disc is CAV, so you get the end of the movie and the extras in CAV. So you're not going to get a big improvement in picture quality because it is mostly CLV, but you get all the nice extras that are, if you're going to get this Criterion release, you might as well spring for the CAV version, because usually you can find this for pretty cheap. And if you're going to find the CLV one, just go ahead and find the CAV one. You do get the Dolby Stereo encoded digital soundtrack, which sounds nice, and the picture quality is quite good. So I would definitely recommend this. It's pretty cheap. You just got to track it down and make sure you get the CAV instead of the CLV. So just another nice Criterion release with a good amount of extras. Now here's another much more common Criterion release with a couple nice extras. This is Spine number 150. This is the Criterion release of Boyz n the Hood. Now this copy is a little beat up. It's got some cover damage and such, but I just picked it up because it was literally dirt cheap. And anytime I find a cheap Criterion, especially with some extras, I figure why not? Maybe one day I'll have a Spine complete shelf. Not that I'm shooting for that, but I never pass up a cheap Criterion, is what I always say. I like the cover image. I like everything about the packaging. It's simple, straightforward, and direct, which is really nice. Again, this is a more common release, so eventually I'm going to pick up one that doesn't have a beat-up cover. But it's just a nice release of, you know, like Fisher King, it was a much more contemporary film from what Criterion usually did. So it's nice of them, and nice to see them get more contemporary releases. Here you get an audio commentary, and you get audition videos, and then 2 deleted scenes, which is pretty nice, because, you know, contemporary films usually would just get put on Laserdisc and tape with pretty much nothing, unless they were a big blockbuster hit or a big action movie where you could include a lot of supplementals about the production. So just a nice, simple, straightforward Criterion release with a good little extras section. Very recommended. Has the original Dolby Stereo encoded soundtrack, so you don't have to deal with a soundtrack remix or anything. So I definitely recommend this, and you can usually get it for dirt cheap, so why not? Now here's one that's not very common, took me forever to find, and I'm very glad I picked it up finally. This is Spine number 160, the Harryhausen classic, Jason and the Argonauts from 1963. This is the special edition version with the CAV sides. There's a movie-only version of this that's much more common. This version is much harder to find and usually goes for a lot more. It's got its own exclusive transfer, and I do like how this image is rendered across the jacket. You know, you get a classic moment of stop motion action and Harryhausen goodness, but it just gives the cover an epic feel, and I like the typeface and the classy black Criterion banner. It's just a wonderful looking jacket. You get a standard gatefold, but I really like this because it gives you they call it the voyage map, but it literally gives you the voyage that they take on the Argo itself, and then every stop is the particular battle listed, and it actually gives you the chapter that it occurs in, which is a really, really nice touch. The chapters are actually encoded here, listed. The film is mostly, well, I take that back. It's side 1 is CLV, and then side 2, 3, and 4 are CAV encoded, and then about partway through side 4 is where the supplement starts, entitled the Jason Supplement. Now there's a lot of really great material in here, most of which is still exclusive to this release. Columbia did their own release on Laserdisc and tape, and they've done their own DVDs, and there are many Harryhausen DVDs and Blu-rays available. So I think this is now out on Blu-ray, and I think there are there's the American version, and then there's the European version, which I think uses either a different transfer or has some slightly different specs. I can't remember off the top of my head, because Harryhausen films have very complicated video histories even to this day. So you get a really, really nice essay, and I like the way this is encoded. It gives it a very classical look to it. The special features are listed here, including an audio commentary, and then the trumpets the fact that this has an exclusive transfer. And I think pretty much all of the editions before this Criterion version, you know, could kind of look pretty messy. Anytime you have a stop motion film, especially the Harryhausen films that were very well loved, so they were very worn down, reissued a lot, but they're going to be handled quite a bit, so it's very easy to damage. Now, if I remember correctly, this disc has a I think the transfer, yes, it is in the 1:3:3 aspect ratio. Pretty much every successive edition mats this off to like 1:6:6 or 1:7:8 for 16:9 screens and such. So if you watch this, you're able to see the entire 1:3:3 image as it was captured in the camera. I think there's some debate. I think this film was intended for widescreen at probably about a 1:6:6, which you would have seen in European theaters. But I think the 1:3:3 is a nice alternate, and Harryhausen himself supervised this and recommended the 1:3:3. But that was probably also because TVs at this time were still 4:3, and it's much better to use the whole image in the NTSC signal and not waste anything with letterboxing bars. So I don't have a big problem with the later releases being matted, but it is nice to have the 133 framing available somewhere. So that's another reason why this Criterion release is important. You get the film's original soundtrack in digital PCM, which sounds fantastic. It's just a loaded Criterion edition that I would highly recommend, especially if you've never seen the film. And it has some really nice exclusive extras that have not carried over. So absolutely recommended. Another really great Criterion Special Edition. All right, so moving on to Spine 168. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but this is the Criterion edition of Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Now, this is it's a CLV disc. It's a single disc title, but it does have special features. So you can actually pick this up for not a whole lot and get a nice Criterion edition. I really like the jacket, how they've given it this old world feel with this sort of photo frame montage with all of the various members of our motley band of, shall we say, misguided knights. And I like how they put the Criterion banner in red. It tries to give some importance to a film that is so magnificently silly at its core, which of course goes with the film's tone, because it's mocking ultra serious historical films of the time period. So I really enjoy this cover, and even though it can kind of look a bit awkward at first, I just think it fits the film so well that it's definitely my favorite cover of the film on any format. And if you ever saw the extraordinarily deluxe DVD, the 3-disc set, it was packaged in a slip box that had like a fake frame to it that was kind of golden, so it reminded me of this. But this is still probably my favorite. If you're not going to use the original poster artwork, I really like this. Some real thought went into the design, and the whimsy of it fits the film. And that kind of continues over onto the rear. Instead of just going with a normal background color, it's actually got the logo of the Knights printed in here. It actually, no, I take that back. I think it's the logo of the infamous rabbit pictured in there. Now, the liner notes have gone back to the horizontal style, so this is a later pressing. It's much more modern. The special features you get are the original trailers. You get some production information, and then some of the deleted materials, I think. I take that back. It's a much smaller section than I remembered, but basically you get a portion of the film subtitled, dubbed in Japanese, so you can see the hilarity of that. That's since been replicated on some of the various DVDs and Blu-rays, where they show portions of the film in multiple language dubs, which is a really funny experience if you've never tried that out before. Then you get the original trailer, and then you get the audio commentary, which is a really, really wonderful, whimsical listen. That's the main part of this that makes it kind of more akin to a special edition. But it's a wonderful commentary with the two directors of the film, because it was split between Terry Gilliam and Terry Jones, which led to a lot of confusion and consternation and such, and that's why they never repeated the experiment. But I think that gives a nice quality to the film. The fact that you had two completely different directors with two completely different ideas of what this film was supposed to be. And you get the film's original mono mix in PCM, which is great because all the remixes suck, and the film was a very, cheap production. So mono is the way it was, mono is the way it should be. It doesn't have any noise reduction applied to it, so it sounds great. And the film is letterboxed for the first time. For a long while, it was just presented 133, either open matte or pan and scanned. And the letterboxing really helps a lot because it was designed for that, to try and give some sense of scope and scale to what was supposed to be epic knights on a quest. So it's definitely supposed to be widescreen. And I just love the transfer. I love the way it looks. I love the mono mix sounds great. And Columbia pretty much recycled this transfer for their release. It just doesn't have the commentary or the little bits of extras here and there. So just a nice Criterion release of a beloved classic that has some care and some devotion put into the packaging and making some extras. So it's just a wonderful Criterion release. You can get it for very cheap. I highly recommend it. Just a really, really nice one. And actually, I forgot, they put in a little joke in the actual information, not the liner notes, but actually in the printing notes on the copyright information. Here it says, it goes under the warning about unauthorized public performances, so on and so forth. Then it says, also Ralph the Wonder Llama is prone to biting. And then over in the corner, it has the credits for the design, the electronic wizardry, and that Liz Collin provided the donuts. And I think, yes, and then Analog Track 2 has the audio commentary, the digital track has the film soundtrack, Analog Track 1 has the entire film dubbed in Japanese, and the extra track, there is no extra track. So there are a couple little fun gags like that. Just like the audio commentary is listed as the directors discussing the making of the film and their sexual preferences on Analog Track 2. And then the 24 seconds that were deleted from the original release, which were in the Castle Anthrax scene that have been present on all video versions, are listed as the 24 extra juicy Castle Anthrax seconds deleted from the original release. Trust me, they're extra juicy. This is a wonderful release, highly recommended. And we have, coming up here to spine number 173, this is the Criterion release of the immortal classic 400 Blows, Truffaut's first film and the film that broke the French New Wave, pretty much in 1959. Beautiful jacket showing Antoine Doinel behind a fence, just extremely captivating upon first glance. They use similar photos on all the other Criterion releases, but this one with the hand gripping the fence, it's just, it's really wonderful. And of course, I was able to pick this one up still in the shrink wrap. I was glad to find this in such good shape. Usually you're going to pay a bit more for this one. It was kind of a later release, but it's still a really, really good one. They've kind of given a design scheme to this rear cover, so it doesn't have the old style Criterion rear, and it doesn't have the more modern one they usually used. This is kind of, it looks much more like a DVD, except the essay is printed in full and much bigger. So the essay is really nice. The transfer is good and is in widescreen. Seeing this film pan and scanned is a crime because this is shot scope and is black and white, and it's extraordinarily powerful for it. Has the original French mono and PCM, which is also great. Now, it's pretty much just the movie only. It's not really going to have any special features. Those all come on the DVDs and then the Blu-ray if you want to pick that up, which I highly recommend. But basically, if I'm remembering correctly, yeah, this does have the, it has an audio commentary. It actually has two. It has a audio essay by Professor Brian Stonehill, which is in English, and then the other audio commentaries in French. It's with Truffaut's lifelong friend and a co-writer. And if I'm remembering correctly, I think it has, it's been a long while since I listened to it, but I think it has the, you're listening to it in French, and I think it kind of translates as you're listening to it. Well, it's been a long time since I listened to it. I listened to it when I first got the DVD, and that had optional subtitles you could just turn on and watch the movie with it. But still, just a wonderful release. This was when Criterion finally got 400 Blows out on their own label, so highly recommended. The film is an immortal classic, and it's just nice to find it on a nice Laserdisc release. Moving on to spine number 175. This is the Robert Altman film The Player, which is just a beautiful, darkly ironic, bitterly funny cover. Easily the best cover of the film, period. The regular Columbia released, New Line release, used the poster art, which was really just kind of straightforward and too simple, but This cover is absolutely perfect. I wish this had just been the regular one sheet for the film. Bitterly dark, and just like the film, which is a bitterly dark, almost satire of the film industry. Even though it was made in 1990, it's still got so many truisms in it. Even if you've just read some books about Hollywood, you'll recognize many things in this. It's a beautiful jacket, and unlike many, the actual piece of celluloid here actually goes into the Criterion banner, so that's a nice, interesting difference. Usually the Criterion banner supersedes all of the art, but in this instance it actually goes into the Criterion space. The cover has kind of got a matte finish to it, so it feels very nice. The gatefold is just the image style, but it's done nicely and spreads over onto the center spine of the gatefold. Here you have the disc production credits, and here you have the chapter stops. It's pretty much fully CLV title, and then it runs on to side 3, which then starts the supplement that then continues on to side 4. This is actually a really loaded Criterion edition that's not known for being a big special edition or a box set. So this is one of the fully loaded Criterions that you can pick up for very, very little. It has a commentary, deleted material, interviews with the cast and crew, in addition to the text and photo supplemental section. So it is absolutely jam-packed. And you get the film's Dolby Stereo encoded soundtrack on the digital tracks. Analog track 1 has the commentary, and analog track 2 has a mono fold down, or just alternate mono mix, which is probably the same as the Dolby Stereo, but it's nice that it's there if you didn't have digital capability. Now, this film was released with the Ultra Stereo moniker, which is why you have this here. That, of course, means they used Ultra Stereo instead of paying for the Dolby license, which would have saved them a bit of money because this was a cheaper production. But it works essentially the same as Dolby Stereo did. It's a matrix process for matrixing 4 channels of sound onto 2 channels. So you're going to use whatever setting on your receiver you use for all the other Dolby Stereo tracks, whether it's Dolby Pro Logic, DTS Neo 6, what have you. It works exactly the same. Ultra Stereo was not used on a whole lot of films, but throughout the late 80s, early 90s, a lot of lower budgeted films started using that. But that never really took off the way Dolby and DTS had. So it was just a nice alternative, but it's going to work exactly the same way. You do get some really nice liner notes. You have a repeat of the cover motif here, and then the importance of the film blurbage, kind of giving you a brief rundown of the film. This is kind of what Criterion switched to and still does on their DVDs and Blu-rays to this day. A small descriptor about the film if you've never heard of it. This film has finally come out on Blu-ray from Criterion, so now this Laserdisc and its special features are not exclusive anymore because most of the stuff is carried over to that. However, this beats the pants off of the standard release, which I had before. Most of the time you just find a pan and scan copy, and it just, it was okay, but it definitely looked like of its time period, being a video master from about 1990, 91. And this film it's shot with a definite style, so the better the picture quality, the better the experience you're going to have. So I would recommend this Criterion disc. Pick this up if you find it. Again, it's pretty cheap. It looks really nice and much better than the standalone official studio release, which doesn't have any extras. And I'd argue that it's also important because it has the original 2.0 surround mix and all of these features appearing for the first time with a lot of attention to care and detail. So just a really nice loaded Criterion release of a more modern title, and one that you can pick up for very, very little money, which is always helpful in collecting Criterion discs. Here we have Spine 182. This is the film Damage, directed by Louis Malle. And ironically, this cover is slightly damaged, so sorry, bad pun. It's got a little water damage increasing and stuff, but not terrible. And again, I picked this up for a really discounted price, so I didn't mind too much. It's not a very common title, and anytime I can pick up a Criterion, especially one of these lesser found ones, I'll go for it if the price is right, even if it's banged up a little bit. But I do like the cover image. It's really quite nice, and it's kind of out of focus a bit, so it really draws the eye in. And you can see this is another kind of more modern Criterion disc because of the more modern typeface on the black bar across the top. That's getting closer to how they were when they put out the first Criterion DVDs with those bars in the late 90s. Now the back, you can see the damage a bit more. It's kind of wrinkled, but not horrible. This is another disc that was originally from New Line, and they licensed it to Criterion. I don't know if New Line actually put this one out themselves like they did the player, but it does carry their logo. It does have a Dolby Stereo encoded digital track, and the analog track 1 has a mono mix, and analog track 2 has a commentary. And then in terms of special features, other than the commentary, you have a video interview with the director, and then some extensive notes in the usual style of Criterion text section. So it's a nice little release of, again, a more modern title from a really respected director that got the Criterion treatment, at least got a spattering of extra features, and is not super common, but it's been a long while since I've seen this film. I just kind of popped it in. I haven't had the chance to go all the way through it, so I'm kind of looking forward to rewatching it fully. But again, anytime I can pick up a Criterion release, particularly one with some actual extras, I'm just totally game for it. So now here's one I was after for a long time. This is Spine number 192. This is, of course, the Criterion release of The Silence of the Lambs. Beautiful image there. I've always really liked this cover. This is probably my favorite cover of any of the film's video releases. It's just so iconic, and the shot that they chose is really, really well done. I think it gives the drama of the film across very, very easily. And if you're not going to use the original one sheet with the white face and the moth over the mouth, then this is the way to go. I love the choice of cover image here. I think it works extraordinarily well. Of course, this is the special edition, which is a mixture of CLV and CAV. The design of the gatefold is beautiful. The text notes kind of look like a cross between what would be in the FBI profile files or maybe from the typewriter of a diseased mind. So it's like kind of a cross of the two, and the images they chose really give across the film's dark tone and just the story and what you're getting into, whether you're coming back to the film or you've never seen it before. So just beautifully done, I think. You get the cast and crew credits along with the side breakdowns. Now the film starts, side 1 is CAV, and then sides 2 and 3 are CLV. And then starting on side 4, which is CAV, you have the extensive supplements. And then it's very easy to get this mixed up with the standalone release, which is all CLV, but it is also 2 discs, if I'm remembering correctly, and can have a gatefold, but doesn't have all the supplementals. So you have to be careful you're getting this Spine 192 full edition versus the 192A without all the extras. The rear carries across this same design scheme. Just one of the really nice, perfectly done Criterion jackets. Not a fancy box set, not a trifold, but I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite Criterion packagings. And of course, they ported this to DVD with all of the features, and now they've released it again on Blu-ray from a new 4K scan, and it looks and sounds fantastic. So definitely pick that up. Before that came out, this was the release to get for the original sound mix, which was a Dolby Surround track, and you get it here in PCM, which is great, which sounds much better than the 5.1 remixes. But now that's been carried over and put on the Criterion Blu-ray, finally, which is great. The other thing is the color timing on this disc is really, really nice, and it was supervised by Tak Fujimoto, the film cinematographer, and looked much better and warmer and darker than the MGM releases, which kind of looked bright and didn't have the same color scheme. So once I saw this and its equivalent DVD, I just fell in love with the look a lot more, and plus it had the original soundtrack and all the fun extras. So you can go for the Criterion Blu-ray now. This is really now more of just for completion's sake you'd want to pick this up, but it's still just a wonderful release, easily the best Laserdisc release, much better than the standard Orion versions on Laser. and especially better than the pan and scan versions you're usually going to come across. It's loaded with extras. The commentary is outstanding, and this was also the first Criterion disc that was officially THX mastered, which is why you see the stamp here and then the note here that this is the THX exclusive digital transfer. So it's not credited on the front. They didn't really put a lot of fanfare in it, but this was the first Criterion release that got the THX seal of approval. So that's another thing to note. But still, just a wonderfully packaged disc, and just with a wonderful loaded special features supplement. You know, a great Criterion release of what was then one of the great modern classics, and a film that's really aged extraordinarily well. So if you've never seen it, do so immediately. None of the sequels and prequels match up at all, and it's really much more of an old-style thriller than anything else, which is the secret to its greatness, I think. But just a wonderful stacked Criterion release. Speaking of stacked Criterion release, here we come to Spine number 196. This is one of the legendary Criterion releases. And of course, we're talking about their full box set release of Terry Gilliam's Brazil. This was the first time that you were able to see Gilliam's full director's cut, his original idea of what the film should be. It has even a few minutes of extra material that weren't in his long version, so had he had the time and the clout from the studio at the time, this is what he would have released. It's also loaded with tons of material about the troubled production history and post-production trouble with Universal, and all of the manipulation that happened and how they tried to shelve the film. And then, of course, it ends with including the infamous studio hack job that's called the Love Conquers All version that mutilates the film down to about 80 minutes or so, and slaps on a happy ending, and it makes absolutely no sense and is god-awful. So as sort of a bitter, ironic joke, I think they put it in here so you could finally see that and understand just what had been left to rot in the studio vault, and thank God it was never released officially. Now, the cover image is absolutely beautiful, and they used this on all of the... there's a CLV version of this with the movie only, and I think there's another slimmed-down version as well. And then, of course, it jumped over to DVD, of which there have been several versions that eventually ported over all this material, and now it's made the jump to Blu-ray on Criterion with all of this material plus new bonus features. So let me show you the rear cover, and it keeps in line with the film's design. Here you have an older style screen, just as the ones that populate the entire film, and the cover motif of the endless filing cabinets continues. Just beautifully thought out, beautifully put together, and I like the classy black box down here with all of the credit information. Of course, it is presented in letterbox. It's a 185 transfer. This film's not scope, of course, and it has the original Dolby Surround mix as PCM, which is great. The later releases remixed it into 5.1, and while it doesn't really sound all that different, I'm such a purist that, you know, I like to hear the track mixed in the way it was originally presented, and I do lean more towards the original 2.0 surround track over the 5.1 remix, even though you're not really losing anything. That's just probably more of me being a purist. But anyway, as you can see, it's a very thick box because there's a lot of discs in here. It's a nice hinge style, so you can actually leave it open. It's also a coffee table display piece because it's so large. Instead of having the standard letter, here you get an insert on a bunch of storage cans and with all kinds of lovely paperwork that fit in with the tone of the film, because if there's anything that there's too much up in Brazil, it's paperwork and bureaucracy. So it's just very cheekily done, and it's just a lovely touch. You can tell that all the guys at Criterion were obsessed with Brazil. The usual note on the note for the viewer and about the transfer and the audio track information is all here. Of course, the digital tracks have the Dolby Stereo. Analog track 1 has a mono fold down, and then track 2 has the commentary from Terry Gilliam himself. And then here's the special thanks section kind of hidden in here. And then the Laserdisc production credits are hidden in the Department of Records sheet, along with the film to transfer, the audio credits, just all the production credits are hidden in here. which is just a lovely touch. And then the chapters are and supplement section are hidden here. The film's fully CAV, which is really, really nice. It is a longer film, so that means you're going to have longer sides. So it goes across 6 sides, and then the production notebook, which is the start of the supplement, starts at the end of side 6. And then you have the rest of side 6, then onto sides 7, 8, and 9 for all of the special features, and then side 9 starts the infamous Love Conquers All version, which is presented in its entirety. And if you've never watched that, it's a very hard watch to get through. I had to go through it in pieces, but it's really something else. It's almost like when you watch the work print of Blade Runner, but as opposed to that, which was literally a work print but was actually assembled and sneak previewed by the production staff, this is a complete studio hack job. So it's virtually unwatchable, but it's wonderful that they included it. So you can really see how bad things got with the studio after the film was finished. And here you have just a long, beautiful essay, the usual Criterion style, but again, cheekily done as if it were out of a typewriter straight from the film, complete with underlined and bolded text. So just continuing the theme of the film right into the sleeve itself. Now the discs are just tucked in here. They do have a nice custom label with the film's logo. But other than that, that's all the goodies that are in the box, because they couldn't fit in anything else because there's so many discs in here. But you just have the Criterion logo tucked in there with the custom Brazil font. But this is actually a really nice set, and the transfer is absolutely first rate. I was surprised. It looks outstanding. Of course, that probably also has to do with the fact that, you know, it's from later on in the 90s, and it is a full CAV encoding, so that's always going to make something pop out more. And for a film with such incredible visuals, you know, I was afraid going down and watching it and standard def was on Laserdisc was potentially gonna not go so well, but it's just a wonderful transfer. I was very pleasantly surprised, and the audio will just light up your system. It's a wonderful quirky mix, just like the film itself. So just a legendary Criterion box. If you ever find one of these, you're probably going to pay a good amount of money. Not so much now that you can get all this stuff on DVD and Blu-ray, but it's also so big and heavy that it's much more expensive to ship. So I was lucky enough to find this locally, so I was very, very pleased, and it's in good shape because it's got so many discs in it, and I'm sure it's very easy for the corners to go, or the box hinge to go, or for people to have cut that and just made it a slip-top box. But this is just a really important release, and just showed the lengths to which Criterion was already willing to go to give a film its definitive presentation, even though they were still in the days of Laserdisc. Here's Spine 216. This is the film Bodies Rest Motion. I've never actually seen this, so this is a Criterion blind buy for me. But again, a later on Spine title that's not super common, so I came across it for cheap, so I've got to spin this up and actually watch the film. The jacket's kind of a matte finish, so that kind of gives it some prestige, I think. It's very rare for me to come across a Laserdisc that has a matte finish like this, so I guess that kind of helps it stand out. And then the Criterion banner is rendered in blue, I guess to blend in with the sky photo. I'll show you the rear. And it's basically a variant on the old standard Criterion rear jacket. But as you can see with the text on the top going this way, it's much later pressing in the more modern style they eventually switched to. Now, even though it's just a single disc with the film in CLV, it does have a nice little supplement section with some featurettes, behind the scenes material, and then the trailers and such. So it is nice that they were able to get some stuff in there. You do get an audio commentary on analog track 2. The digital track has a Dolby Stereo encoded soundtrack, and then the other analog track has a mono fold down. So I'm going to have to watch this, but it's a nice looking little Criterion release, and it's always nice when they're able to get at least some supplements, even if it's just a single disc CLV title. Now here we come to spine number 220, and this is a much more difficult to obtain release, but a really nicely done one. Of course, talking about Wells's Othello. This beautiful release from Criterion. Just beautiful choice of cover image. The blackness really just stands out, and of course blends right into the black Criterion banner. So just a wonderful front cover, and of course a very bold and striking image. I was lucky enough to pick this up sealed, and it actually had a Criterion sticker on it, which isn't super common, but it actually has a Criterion special edition sticker with an older version of the Criterion Collection logo. So I thought that was just really nice. So I just wanted to show you that. It's not very often that I find a Criterion still sealed, and especially not with some type of sticker or hype sticker on it. I thought that was pretty cool. Now, show you the gatefold. Again, very immaculate, ornate looking, with a beautiful long essay about the film and about its production. As with many Wells films, and especially his Shakespeare adaptations, they were not without their production hassles and headaches and budgetary issues. And you get your production credits across the spine, and the analog track information. Of course, you get the original track in digital and analog, and then analog track 2 has a commentary with Peter Bogdanovich and others, which is a nice listen. The chapters are over here. They're kind of laid out in an interesting way. The whole thing just, again, gives you the idea of, you know, the importance that's attached to this film, or any film that Wells actually was able to complete. And then the rear is equally classy and carries on the same design scheme, loaded with special features in addition to the commentary. So this is a wonderful release if you can actually pick it up. It's a mixture of CAV and CLV. Criterion seemed to be doing that a lot at about this time. So instead of having a full CAV version of the film, they give you at least some of it in CAV, and then move on to the extras. So then that way they can keep the number of discs down and just get it into a single gatefold, but then give you some premium sides, I guess. So it's a really nice release, and this film got various DVD releases overseas and such, and it's been kind of harder to see because it's had some rights issues, just like pretty much all of the Wells films that aren't super well known to most people, primarily due to how he had to finance them from all kinds of different sources. But as far as I know, it's been they've done some restoration work on it again, and I think it's either about to or has already come out on Blu-ray overseas again. I want to say there's a version out in Spain, but I may be wrong. And I think there's plans to bring it out here in the States if they haven't already. I just can't remember off the top of my head, but I was very happy to find this because it had been a little while since I'd seen it, and I always enjoy seeing how Criterion took a stab at things. So just a beautiful release that was. So here we are with spine number 227. This is the special edition release of Prince of Tides. And again, I picked this one up sealed, so it has the Criterion Director's Edition sticker with Barbra Streisand's signature printed on here. They did that for a number of releases that the director would approve, so it's nice to actually have that still with this. And the cover looks beautiful. I haven't seen this film in a very long time. Actually, I think I saw it when I was a kid. I think my parents may have rented it at some point or something. I know I've seen it. It's just been ages, so I've got to check this out. Open up the gatefold. Nice image usage on the panel here, although they went with a central image and then just kind of put some other photos in here. Looks kind of like what you'd get on some MGM gatefolds and such. Then the chapters are here. The film makes it over onto 3 sides, and then the end of side 3 starts the supplement, which is pretty loaded. So this I would consider as a Criterion special edition because it has a wealth of pre-production, post-production information, stills, trailers, interview snippets, featurettes, and then deleted scenes. Actually, a whole gallery of deleted scenes included here in individual chapters. So a really stacked Criterion release. And it's much superior to the standalone Columbia release, which, if I remember correctly, doesn't have any extras. Nice essay here from Bruce Eder, who's always exceptional in his Criterion pieces and commentaries. Again, you do get a audio commentary as well to the whole special features section. So again, a loaded Criterion Special Edition. You get the film's original Dolby Surround encoded mix on the digital tracks. And then you get a mono fold down on the other analog track. So in case you don't have digital capability. It's just a really nice release, and again, a Criterion Special Edition that's not going to cost you a whole lot of money. I know the film's come out on DVD. I don't know if it's out on Blu-ray as of yet. So I don't think all of these special features have carried over to other releases, so you'll want to pick this up for those and to get the PCM version of the original sound design. And it's just a really nice Criterion disc with a load of special features that's still pretty common, so you can still find it for very, very cheap. I picked this up sealed and I only paid like $3 for it. So again, there are ways to get Criterion Special Editions for little money. It does exist. Now this one is going to be a bit pricier. It's much harder to find. It is spine number 233. Of course, talking about the masterpiece Cat People, directed by Jacques Tourneur, produced by Val Lewton for RKO, and what started the celebrated and important and extremely famous cycle of B horror films that Lewton produced for RKO in the 1940s. And really, this film and the others in that cycle are arguably what started the notion of the psychological horror film in a lot of ways. They're very adult, they're very dark, and they're all about the concept of what is unseen versus what is seen. And if you've never seen this film, you absolutely deserve to at some point. You should actively seek it out. Criterion finally got the rights back and has put it out on Blu-ray now. So the extras on this Laserdisc have now carried over to that. For a while, this was the only way you could hear the Bruce Eder commentary for the film, and it's got some other supplements tucked in here in addition to some trailers. So not a stacked special edition, but the commentary is really, really good. The packaging is outstanding with a beautiful essay here, and the design is really, really nice and fits the inherent dark romance that runs throughout the entire film. So tonally it fits the film perfectly. So it's just a really well done single disc Criterion edition of a great classic film that I could watch it every year around this time, and I never get tired of it. And the other films are also great that Lewton produced. So if you've never seen any of them, absolutely seek them out. But this film is the one that is an all-out masterwork. The others, they are really great. Some are better than others, but if you had to go to one, this would be the one that it'd be the one to start with at least. So I cannot recommend it highly enough, and it's just a beautiful Criterion package. And if you manage to track it down, I definitely would. The transfer is lovely. Even though I have the DVD of the Lewton films, I actually wound up coming back to this Laserdisc over and over because of the extras, and I just like the quality of it a bit more. It's a little bit worn in places, but it just sounds and feels more I hate to say it, but it sounds and feels more alive. But anyway, all this has been supplanted by the new Criterion Blu-ray, which is beautiful. So absolutely track that down if you haven't picked it up yet. But in case you want the Laserdisc or you come across it in the used bins, it's an absolute must. It's just a beautiful Criterion disc. Here's spine number 234, which is the film Naked, directed by Mike Leigh. This is it's actually kind of not a super easy to find Criterion, but I've actually found a couple. I was lucky to find this one still sealed, and it's got this really nice cover. At first you don't even see the Criterion banner. It's actually printed very, very lightly here, and here is sort of a ISBN barcode kind of printed in here. It's a really interesting, very minimalist cover, and of course you have the title font all lowercase and red, which is very, very striking. So you kind of have to stare at this cover for a while in different shades of light to actually see everything, but it does have the normal Criterion banner, which I didn't notice for the longest time. I picked this one up still sealed, so here is the shrink wrap with the director approved edition with Mike Leigh's signature printed on here, as I did with all the directors. And again, like I said, you can pick this up. It can be found. It's not a super hard to find Criterion, but not very common either. But I have come across a number of them, so you can pick it up in good shape. You open up the gatefold, which is a really nice, extensively printed essay. This beautiful still that they used for the Blu-ray release, so if that looks familiar, that's probably why. Really, really nice essay, printed in green as well, so that kind of fits with the theme of the packaging. The film is spread across 3 sides, with side 3 concluding with the supplement. So here's the rear cover, keeping with the same design, and thankfully the text is printed a bit lighter, so it's much more readable. The extras include commentary, the director's short films, and excerpts of other short films, in addition to some video press material kind of made around the time of the film's release. And it's been a little while since I've seen this film, so I'm going to spin this disc up and check it out for myself. You get a letterbox transfer with the film's original Dolby encoded Matrix surround track on there, so here's the little Dolby logo tucked in here, and the actual digital sound logo, Janus logo and such, is actually here on the side, kind of tucked in here, very, very small. So again, it's a nice Criterion release with a nice custom packaging job that's different from their usual stuff, and it was nice for them to do a modern film and actually give it at least a nice 2-disc edition with a set of extras. So this kind of reminds me of their version of Silence of the Lambs. You know, it's not a fully stacked multi-disc CAV release, but it is a nice stacked standalone release. Now here's spine number 235. This one is pretty difficult to find, and you have to pay pretty good money to get one of these days. This is, of course, the release of Repulsion, the Polanski classic, and beautiful cover design that really works with the film extraordinarily well. This is probably my favorite cover for the film. If you're not going to use the original poster artwork, get the lovely black Criterion banner across the top, and then this 2-tone rendering of a shot of Catherine Deneuve's eye, which is just fantastic. I even like the pink font, which goes with her sort of character traits in the beginning, I think. So anyway, just a really nice, very striking, arty design. Open up the gatefold. Beautiful gatefold. This one is actually done in 2 different ways. The essay is printed here, and it's actually continued from the rear, so it's a long essay on the back that continues here. And then you have the images and the production credits going this way, so that it kind of gives a topsy-turvy, stilted look to the gatefold, which of course fits the film. If you've ever seen it, you know what I'm talking about. You get a nice special thanks, which has both Polanski and Deneuve in there because they recorded a Criterion commentary for this disc, which is a nice listen. So then the other part of the gatefold, you have the chapters here. The film is actually, it's CLV for side 1, and then sides 2 and 3 go on in CAV. So at least you get about half the film roughly in CAV, which is nice. And then side 4 is a CLV side that has the extras, which are primarily some of Polanski's early short films, and then some, I think it's some video bits from around the time of the production of the film, and then of course the production credits and then a few text slides in between. So a nice little supplemental section, but the big draw is going to be the audio commentary on analog track 2. The film's original mono mix is digitally encoded here, and it also is on analog track 1. Flip over to the back, which is also beautifully designed. Just a wonderful, try and get this to lay flat. There we go. Just a wonderful, wonderful design. Again, it keeps with the usage of black and white with some pink and sort of gray-green. It's just a really, really interesting, nice cover design, and in a lot of ways is exemplary of how Criterion got with Laserdisc, and pretty much nobody could touch them in terms of packaging on the format. And as nice and arty as a lot of their Blu-ray titles can be, sometimes I think they get a little bit too arty. So I really wish they would kind of bring back some of these older designs. Again, they're keeping with the motif of going in different ways. Here you have the cast and credits list, the paragraph blurb about the film, the start of the essay, and then here is the special features list sideways. So just a really, really nice touch. And the transfer on here is actually really, really nice. It's transferred in 1.75 to 1, and I think that's pretty much replicated by the Criterion Blu-ray. But there was the Criterion DVD in between, but on Laserdisc, this was definitely the best version you could come across. And again, it goes for a good amount these days because it's not super common, but it's still just a really, really nice package, and I'm glad I was able to find it. So definitely recommend it. Here's one that took me a very long time to find. This is Spy number 238, of course referring to the Criterion Special Edition of This Spinal Tap. Now, usually you'll come across 238A, which is the CLV version. It shares the same great transfer in the film's original Dolby Stereo track, which is usually lost on a lot of later releases, but it loses the important audio commentary, which is exclusive to this and the Criterion DVD, along with the extras section. So here is this lovely gatefold with nice stylization that goes with sort of, I guess, what the faux band's typeface would be on a lot of their albums. You have this nice essay printed here, and then the film is broken onto two sides primarily. Yeah, two sides, and then supplementals start on side 2. So if you get the single disc version, you're pretty much getting the same transfer. You're just losing all the supplementals. And it's got everything from the trailers to the to a bunch of production notes, and then a lot of deleted material. Most of this has all been replicated on the various MGM versions, but the big draw here, I think there's 1 or 2 little bits that are only on the Criterion releases, but the big draw is the audio commentary. Now, the difference is there's a commentary on the MGM versions, but it has the actors in character primarily. And here the audio track is with the actors pretty much just talking straight about the film and their own remembrances and such. And it also has a commentary from Rob Reiner and other production key crew members, which that's also been replicated if I'm remembering correctly. So there's 3 tracks, and it's really just the one with the actors talking straight that you want to pick this up or the DVD for. And the rear cover is also very simple, but very nicely done, and it's very stylized, even though it's very, very, very simplistic on a black jacket. And if you look, it's kind of tilted to kind of give some wonkiness to the jacket, as if it were made almost like a fanzine, or somebody made it backstage by just, taping stuff on a board or such. So I thought that was a nice touch. And of course, it kind of looks like a heavy rock or metal album from the 70s or 80s with a very simplistic design. The black cover almost makes you think of the Back in Black album, and some of the logo design reminds you of various heavy metal bands. So that's another nice touch. Now, what you're going to really want this disc for is the original Dolby Stereo track in PCM, which is also on the DVD, but it's encoded as lossy Dolby Digital. It's a lot better than the 5.1, particularly in all the music scenes. It's the way the film was originally mixed. It was a low-budget film, so it's never going to have, super dynamic range or a really great mix. Some people might say it's a little muddy or very mono in the dialogue scenes, but, that's how it was designed, being, a faux documentary. And MGM remixed it into 5.1, and while the mix is okay, I much prefer the original, and it sounds best on here. And the transfer itself is quite excellent for the time, even though it is analog. If you've seen the Criterion DVD, you'll know what it looks like. It's got a nice quality to it, good color, nice detail. Of course, it's not going to stack up against the latest MGM HD remaster, but still, it's the best version on Laserdisc with some exclusive extras, so I highly recommend it. You can track it down, but you got to make sure you've got the CAV version here with the special features. I should say that again, the CLV CAV mix, as opposed to just the CLV version, which itself is great if that's all you can find. Usually this can go for a bit of money, but if you're patient enough like I was, you can pounce on one when you find it for pretty cheap. And the other thing I should mention is most copies or early copies came with an actual Spinal Tap guitar pick. This did not. Not everyone's going to come with that, but that's something you should be aware of if you want one that's pristine or you're actually looking for that. Now we're coming up to spine number 245, which is a very important release for a lot of different reasons and still is an important essential release. Of course, talking about Criterion's full CAV release of John Woo's masterpiece, Hard Boiled, which is indisputably the greatest action film that will ever be made by human hands. And if you've never seen the film, do so immediately because you're missing out on what are you doing with your life. Now, this is a little dinged up because it is a trifold, so most of the times when you're going to pick this up, it's going to have, you know, some damage to the spine, some wear and tear, so that's understandable. But once you see the gatefold inside, it's definitely well worth it, even though this packaging style can be a bit annoying. Now this design, this image here was kind of used on various DVDs, including the Criterion DVD. The Ford Windstar DVD used the same image, so this is going to be kind of familiar and can kind of get confusing when you're trying to sort through the different versions of this film, because this film, like all the other Hong Kong classics and the other John Woo films, really has one of the worst video histories in terms of, you know, having a proper transfer with proper subtitles and the original audio tracks. It's still to this day impossible to track down a proper transfer with good audio and good subtitles, good color, things we take for granted with a lot of titles. So you really have to do a mix and match and turn to fan efforts, and it's still a mixed bag. So this release was really the first good American release that was available. The Killer was also the other Criterion Woo title, which was the same thing. It was the first really good American release. And it's got a beautiful trifold, which here on the center panel has one of the paper cranes that's central to one character in the film. But the inside of the gatefold is absolutely outstanding. And I'm going to have to try and do this like this so you can get to at least see it. But you have this beautiful essay that runs almost the entire length of the gatefold, and the actual title is printed in flames, which is just great. And here you have more paper cranes and the John Woo credit. It is really hard to show off some of these trifolds, so I'm just going to have to do it this way. The chapters and production credits are here, and of course it's read this way. Forgive me if this kind of cuts off. I'm trying to stagger this as best I can. Now the film is encoded CAV, which is wonderful. It runs onto 5 sides, which also at the end of the film, on side 5, it goes to the supplemental section, which is filled with all kinds of special features. It includes the Cantonese closing and opening credits, because in this version it's kind of Americanized or Englishized, I guess, in terms of the title font. There's a beautiful essay printed in text form. You get the Cantonese trailer, and then all kinds of EPK footage from the time period of the film, including some on-set footage, and then the production credits and color bars. Now, the audio track, this is a mono film. Most Hong Kong films were still mixing mono because, you know, they were never going to be as technically superior as an American film. So the film is mono, and that's replicated on the digital tracks. And then analog track 1 has an analog mono, and analog track 2 has a great commentary with John Woo, producer Terrence Chang, and then English filmmaker, or American, I can never remember which, Roger Avery, which is a great listen. It's different to the track that was on the Windstar DVD, just like The Killer. There's 2 different commentary tracks, and then the Dragon Dynasty release has a Bey Logan commentary, which is also a pretty good listen. So there's 3 commentary tracks floating around there. Now this is subtitled, and the audio track is in Cantonese. Here is the 3rd panel with the special thanks section and a beautiful shot of one of the central standoffs in the film. And it even tells you where the commentary was recorded at, and Burbank, which is kind of nice. That's not very often credited, so it's kind of funny to see where they would have gone in to record their track back in the day. Cut over to the rear cover, which is beautiful. You get more of Hong Kong at night, and then Again, just nice printing, very simple, straightforward. Kind of bigger text, which is what they were kind of doing around the mid-90s or so. And you get the large Criterion Videoscope logo, which is a nice touch. They kind of dropped that after a while, but it was their own terminology. Anyway, the special features are listed here, as I mentioned and went over before. But the real reason why you want to pick this disc up or the CLP version is to get the best release of the film's original mono audio. Every other version's a 5.1 remix or 7.1 remix. They sound awful. There's an English dub, which is horrendous and sounds pretty crummy, especially once you've heard the original. I can't stand English dubs unless they were, specifically designed by the production team at the time. And especially for the Hong Kong action films, it's always better to go with the original mono tracks. And every other release, even the ones that have a lossy mono, like the Dragon Dynasty versions, they don't compare to the Criterion release. So a lot of the fan versions and such and custom editions that you can look at online, they've taken their audio from this, and it's good for doing so because this is the best release for audio. In terms of picture, it's actually pretty good for Laserdisc. The CAV encoding does help, but it can look a little washed out at times, a little hazy, but it is a Hong Kong film being transferred to Laserdisc back in the day, so it's not going to look as good as an HD transfer, which very few actually have. The only true HD version out there, I think, is a Japanese Blu-ray, which kind of has some dodgy color timing and does not have the original audio track, but it does have a proper HD transfer. So best picture version is a foreign Blu-ray, but you'd have to mix in the original audio and make a custom version, and it's still not perfect. The subtitles on here are very good. They're not perfect translations, but most versions of this film have like subtitles based on the English dub, so they're pretty much all similar, and they get the idea across. This is better than most in terms of the subtitles, but it's still not quite perfect. So it's a really important release for the audio track. They're having a great Laserdisc transfer with some nice extras, some of which are still exclusive to this. If you have the DVD, you can get the extras that way and the transfer that way. It's a direct copy of this Laserdisc. It's non-anamorphic, but you lose the mono PCM. So that's what makes the Laserdiscs important. So fantastic release of the best action film ever made. Here we go with Spine 258, which is the release of Olivier's version of Henry V. This is a beautiful, beautiful design. Just really intricate, very arty. They've recreated the V, but with one side being a bar and the other side being a piece of 35mm film with 4 per frames, with the center one actually being a frame from the film. It's very stylized and runs right into the Criterion bar. It's just a really, really intricately designed jacket that's just wonderful. They reused it for their DVD release, which is really, really nice. I think after a certain point, they started hitting it out of the park almost with every single Laserdisc they put out. Now, the gatefold is similarly designed with a lovely essay with very readable but stylized with the rest of the cover typeface. And then here, you get a layout of the royal family, which is really, really, really helpful, very nice, and just a wonderful way to use a gatefold. And again, they're keeping with the same design in terms of color, text, and typeface, which is a nice touch. And then here is the chapter listing. The film goes on to 3 sides, and there's a bit of supplements at the end of side 3. But not a whole lot. This isn't really a full-on special edition, although it kind of looks like it. It's also not very common. It can get pretty expensive, but I was very happy to find a sealed copy locally, very surprisingly actually. And again, tons of text, beautifully designed, goes with the rest of the cover very well. The mono is on the digital tracks along with the analog track, and then I want to say there's a commentary on here. Let me double check. No, there isn't. But still, this was like the first really major cleaned up version of Henry V. They did the other Olivier Shakespeare films around the same time, and then they redid them on DVD. So it was really nice to finally start seeing these very important films over in England, but that were respected over here, but they weren't as important. I guess they were really more cherished by English teachers who wanted a movie version to show in their classrooms that was serious, straightforward, and actually of some quality. So it's just a really, really well-designed release with a really nice transfer as well. Of course, it's color 1:3:3:1, but it looks really, really outstanding. And of course, being a later issue from Criterion, you get a fancier transfer, fancier jacket and stuff. I just would think that they would have tucked in some extra features, but I guess it was more of getting a really good transfer because the special thanks credits a lot of studio people. So this was really a fresh attempt at bringing this classic back to life. So really, really nice release. Here we go to number 260. This is another very rare Criterion. I somehow found a copy locally. Somebody traded in some Criterions once. It was actually never opened. This is the release of F for Fake, the Orson Welles. I don't even know how to describe it. It really defies genre, it defies narrative, and that's part of what makes it genius. It's a really nice cover, kind of fits the whimsical, all over the place tone of the film. Very oddly designed with the various different colors, typefaces, shapes, and it goes into the Criterion banner here. So I actually quite like this. I like it even more than the DVD and Blu-ray cover. This was the first good release of this film practically anywhere. It's letterboxed. It has the original mono as PCM. It's kind of short on extras. It really just has the a promotional trailer that was very, very little seen at this time. But it was really the fact that you were finally being able to see this film properly. With most of Welles's later films, you were lucky to see them at all, and if you did, it would be in a bootleg with horrible quality, it'd be missing bits and pieces, or there were various edits of the film because the rights ownership was a literal nightmare. There's still ongoing litigation and struggles to try and get several of his films actually in some showable form or even seen, and even the ones that are available, the distribution can be kind of nutty. So it was really nice to actually be able to see this properly. You get a beautiful text essay from Jonathan Rosenbaum, who's a big Wells scholar. So again, very light on extras, but still very, very nice to see. And again, I don't think they made too many of these because it's very rare. It can go for very high dollars. So very highly recommended for Wells fans, for non-Wells fans. If you give it a chance, I think you'd really like it. So a great Criterion release of a forgotten classic. Here's Spine 267, which is the release of Oliver Twist, the David Lean version, beloved by many. Just like the Criterion version of Great Expectations that Lean did. The Lean Dickens adaptations are black and white beloved classics and are by far and large the best version of Dickens on film, period. I know you can go and look at like Masterpiece Theater or miniseries versions that are more accurate to the text and get more of the text on screen, but for many people, myself included, it's never going to get better than the black and white versions that David Lean directed. So it's a really nice cover and very, very much fits with the artwork design that Criterion did for Great Expectations. So you get these tinted stills, kind of done in a roughhouse design, which looks really nice. Now the rear is very similar. It's just a beautiful usage of a 12-inch jacket. You get a nice essay, you get the chapters. It doesn't have any special features, but it does have the film's mono on the digitally encoded, which is great. And it does include the theatrical trailer, so that's pretty much all you're going to get in terms of extras. This was replicated on DVD, but of course you lose the PCM mono. But again, this was the first really good release of this film in the States, for sure, outside of some maybe half-decent VHS tapes. So hopefully these come out on Blu-ray here stateside somewhere, because that would be really, really great. If you haven't seen this and you're a Dickens fan or you like the idea of Oliver Twist, it's very highly recommended. And if it's been a while, why not rewatch it? Now here's one that's very well known among Laserdisc fans for both good and bad reasons. This is Spine 271, the Pulp Fiction Criterion box set. Now of course Tarantino designed this himself in terms of the packaging, the side breaks, and just generally everything. So if you have any qualms with this, take it up with him. Criterion didn't do it. This is the cover image, which seems a little weird at first, but you kind of get used to it. This one's a little dinged up, but I didn't mind. I bought it from a local guy who was getting rid of most of his collection, and most people want to hang on to this for sentimental reasons. It cost a lot back in the day, and anytime you have a Criterion, I find it kind of hard to give up, or even if it's been superseded by other versions. Now it opens up, and the original owner taped the blurb stickers in here, which is very nice. Here you have the director approved signature on here, with the touting its THX certified scope transfer with AC3 encoding, deleted scenes, exclusive interviews, so on and so forth, and then the AC3 Dolby sticker. Now this, compared to the standalone release, this is going to have all the extras. So if you're wondering why the regular release is so spare, it's because all the effort went into this. You get a beautifully designed gatefold with some of the original film poster imagery and promotional imagery, and all the text is stylized, which is nice. The SA material is actually very, very good. I'll show you the rear here. And then the rear goes into the sides and production credits. Now, the film is CAV encoded, but it's also kind of spread across too many sides, which gets very frustrating. And the extras, even though they are there, it's not like there's a whole lot of them, so you could have very easily saved sides. Some people thought, for some reason back in the day, that Tarantino just wanted to use more sides and have a box set just to have a box set, which may very well be. If you're watching the film, you're going to find yourself flipping discs much more often than normal. It's not really bad, but the first time you sit down and watch this, it's kind of a little weird. Now, the digital track has the original Dolby Surround mix. The AC3 is actually a remix done from the original track. This film did not release in 5.1, it only released in Dolby SR. So the digital track, the 2.0 surround, is actually the original mix, which a lot of later releases have lost. And even though the AC3 on this is not really remixed, I actually find myself preferring the Dolby Surround, but then again, I'm a purist. If I know the original option is out there, I'm going to select that, even if it's not as good as a remix. But I do think it is slightly better, especially in the dialogue. Plus, that's the way the film was originally mixed. That's what they kept in mind. So I would say go with that if you're going to pick this up. Definitely check out the AC3 if you can. I think the later 5.1 tracks have been remixed in various ways. Tarantino's very well known for going back and kind of messing with his transfers. A lot of the Blu-rays have had the color and contrast kind of cooked. But here you have the various credits. Like I said before, you get 4 or 5 deleted scenes, some interview material with Tarantino, no commentary, which is kind of a shame. You would think this would have gotten a commentary, but still, it's a nice release if you can find it. A lot of people hold on to it, so it does go for higher dollar amounts, but it's not like it's got anything super essential. I'd say the most essential thing is the PCM 2.0 soundtrack. You do get nice custom labels with this sort of circle target logo, and then the reverse is black. So, and the box is pretty well padded, so you can get it without ripped corners. Here's the rear, nice with the blood spatter design and stylized text. You get all of the breakdown of features, which makes you think, oh, this is going to be stacked, but it's really not so much. You get the THX stamp here, digital sound, Videoscope logo, Dolby logo. It's joined at the seam, so the box is not a lift top. But it's a nice package. And once you get over the kind of hurdles of the fact that it's got a lot of sides for not a whole lot of features, it's definitely watchable. It's a rather nice Laserdisc transfer. It's not reference grade or anything, but I would say, because it is CAV, it's going to look better than the standalone version. Some people I know track down the Japanese version, so I haven't really stacked all of these various Laserdisc editions side by side. But once I picked this up, this was pretty much it for me. I'm not a huge Tarantino fan, so the fact that I was able to get a good transfer with the Criterion extras and the original sound mix, I was pretty much good. So I've never picked up another DVD or Blu-ray version. Haven't really felt the need to. Whereas with Jackie Brown, I can't get enough copies of it. That's the one Tarantino film I really, really like. And hopefully one day I can actually pick up the Laserdisc of. But anyway, so this is just a nice, really stacked Criterion edition. It was nice they were able to get a popular title licensed from the studio. So if you can find it, it's a really nice release to have. Looks great on the shelf. But do keep in mind, it's not super special for any reason, I'd say, other than having the original soundtrack. Here's Spine 273. I just recently picked this one up. This is The Magic Flute, directed by Ingmar Bergman. Anytime you come across a Bergman film, you can't say no. And I may have seen part of this once, but I don't think I've ever seen it all the way through, so I'm quite excited to see this. Of course, Criterion announced they're doing their big Bergman box set, so again, this is really kind of outdated, but it's a very rare Criterion disc, and I was happy to come across it, still in the shrink. It's not a gatefold, so it's got multiple discs shoved in here, so it has some dinged corners and such, which is pretty much going to happen on any title that doesn't have a gatefold. Nice, very intricate color design and text design. It's got a nice essay in here with the cast and credit list. The mono is digitally encoded, so you get it as PCM and also as an analog backup. There's no commentary, there's no real special features outside of, I think it may have a trailer. No, it doesn't. So it doesn't have a trailer. It's pretty much just the movie. But again, in this era, you were lucky to get a foreign film transferred, where it was not cut or had its correct audio or had proper subtitles or was in the correct ratio. So anytime they could get a really great foreign film transferred over here properly, that was in and of itself a victory. So if you find this, I'd recommend it. Bergman, even on his worst day, is better than 99% of everybody else. And it's actually a really rare title. I didn't know it at the time, but when I went to add it on my LDDB collection list, I found it's actually quite valuable. So definitely pick it up. It's a rare Criterion disc. Here's Spine number 280, which is itself relatively rare. This is the classic film Odd Man Out, directed by Carol Reed. It has a beautiful, beautiful cover, kind of rendered in an off-green style that gives the suspense quality of the film across. Of course, this was made pretty much right before Reed did The Third Man, so it's sort of similar in terms of style tone, and it's kind of one of the films that kind of led up to that. So anything Third Man-esque or related, or anything Reed did, I have to see 1,000 times. So this is a really nice release. I was very happy to find it. It's not, it can be super pricey. It is kind of harder to find, so I was very happy to actually get a copy of it. It's since come out on DVD and such, so but this is a nice Criterion release. It has the original mono digitally encoded along with an analog track. No real special features, unfortunately. It's just the movie on a single two-sided disc, CLV. So again, it was just nice to get this film properly transferred in good quality. And at least has a nice appreciation essay here. So at least you get that much, and you know that you knew back in the day that somebody besides you cared about this film. So again, a nice release, great classic film. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. Reed is one of the great unheralded directors, so absolutely recommend it. I'm going to keep going with Spine number 284, which is the CLV reissue of the masterpiece The Killer, directed by John Woo. And although I said earlier Hard Boiled is the greatest action movie ever made, The Killer is right there with it. The Killer has probably more of an emotional context. It's a lot more character-driven. Not to say that Hard Boiled itself is not character-driven, because it has wonderful characterizations, but this one really packs a more emotional wallop. It has some direct nods to classical Hollywood storytelling and has one of the great film endings as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, the Criterion first did it as a big CAV set like Hard Boiled, which is, I still haven't found yet. It can be quite pricey, but you get the same transfer here with this beautiful cover that uses one of the central images of the film and it's kind of rejuxtaposed, and it's just a wonderful looking cover. It's my favorite cover for any of the video releases, and I really wish this had been the theatrical one sheet. This was, in some foreign territories, this central image of Chow Yun-fat here, but I just love the way they transposed it onto the blood on a white background, and with the, you know, Target site logo. It really jumps off the Laserdisc jacket, and of course you have the classic Criterion banner. Now, being the CLV disc, it does lose the extra section and the commentary from the CAV set, but all that stuff was replicated on the Criterion DVD, so if you have that, then you don't have to plunk down for the big CAV set. But that does have some really nice custom artwork, so you may want to do it anyway. And once I finally find a decent copy that's not too pricey, I'm going to add it, because the Criterion version still to date is the only good release here in the States. This was in widescreen with the original mono mix and proper English subtitles, and outside of the WinStar DVD, which came out at the same time as the Criterion DVD, and that has an alternate commentary, so you'll want to pick that up for a slightly different commentary. Kind of covers some of the same ground as the Criterion commentary track, but that's the only other good release here in the States. Every other one is terrible. The Blu-ray is a 1080i abomination, so avoid that at all costs. It's one of the worst Blu-rays ever released in the US. It's sad to say, but you're still stuck with the old Criterion transfer for the best version of The Killer here in the US. There have been various efforts by fans to try and piece together a better version. There's also some foreign editions that have a different edit, as some of these Hong Kong classics would have different links in different territories. But the big difference with the Criterion version is the characters give each other nicknames in the film, if you've never seen it, and some subtitles have different nicknames, like it's actually translated to be a different name in the subtitles. So you may get used to one version and then pick up the Criterion or another and it's different. That's just something minor, but that is a difference you might notice if you've seen the film on other copies a number of times. But the transfer itself is quite excellent. Like I said with Hard Boiled, the picture can be a little soft, but it is transferred very well, has nice color, and the film's mono sounds fantastic, and it's the best way you can hear the film soundtrack. And the subtitles are excellent. They're not like crappy dubtitles or anything, but they do have the different character nicknames in them. So it's a great way to watch the film. If you've seen the DVD, you've seen this same master, and the DVD itself is out of print and not easy to find. So this is a great film. It's got my highest recommendation. For action fans or just anyone in general, it's a masterpiece, and proof that John Woo was absolutely the top of his game before he came to the States. And in many ways, I wish he had never done that or had come over later, because once he came over to the States, they all his stuff got to a point where it came out being cartoonish instead of poetic, which his Hong Kong material was. So great, beautifully packaged release of this masterwork, and that sadly does not have a decent release still to this day. So you'll want to track this down either on Criterion DVD, the old WinStar DVD. This Laserdisc is a nice cheap way to get the Criterion transfer with the PCM mono, but you're going to have to pay a bit more for the CAV set if you're going after that. And this one isn't very common either. I was very happy to find it. But yeah, even this will go for a bit of change, but absolutely recommended. This is a masterwork. Here's Spine 294 with the Sword of Doom. It's been a very long time since I've seen this. I just picked this up because it was included in a bunch of other Criterions I was looking at online, and again, never say no to a Criterion title. But it's a pretty nice looking cover. It's very stylized. I like how it translates from the kind of black and white side to the hellish red tinted side. You have the Criterion banner. Unfortunately, there's no gatefold, so it does kind of have some creases and such. It's one of the few Criterion titles where it's multi-disc and doesn't have a gatefold. This doesn't really have any special features. It's pretty much the film only, but it is widescreen with a digital soundtrack and an analog backup track. The film goes on to 3 sides, and you get the obligatory color bars and a nice essay here. So at least it was a good first presentation of this film on video. As far as I know, I don't think this was in widescreen here in the States before. I think you would have been lucky to have found it on VHS, but still, a nice release. It's been superseded by DVDs, and I think it's out on Blu-ray now somewhere. I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it is. But not a super common Criterion, but just a nice, solid, movie-only Criterion disc. And, you know, again, if you're a fan of this or you're looking for some of these, you can't say no. You can't turn it down when they pop up and they're actually not overpriced. Here's Spine number 304, and this is a really great one, and also an important one. This is the Criterion release of El Cid. This is based off of the early 90s, I believe 94 Miramax-led restoration. Martin Scorsese and the Film Foundation partnered with Miramax to restore the film and get it back into a limited theatrical re-release. Now, El Cid was a Samuel Bronston-produced historical epic directed by Anthony Mann. They also did Fall of the Roman Empire, and it's one of those Bronston-produced historical epics that's kind of forgotten these days. Probably much more well known in Europe, dealing with actual historical figures, times, places in Europe that are, shall we say, not very well known among Americans here in the States. It is a huge undertaking. The visuals, the spectacle is what you watch this film for. It is insanely massive, and of course, in the pre-CG age, everything you see on screen is actually being done for real. The score is absolutely incredible, and what most may know this for, because Miklos Rozsa pulled out all the stops and composed what is one of his best works, and it really elevates the film. Now, the gatefold is quite lovely. It breaks down all of the chapters. The film is CLV because it's so long. It's just a bit over 3 hours, and it's actually got, for each chapter, it has the music cue titled here in parentheses, so you can actually navigate to the actual music cue you're looking for, which is a really nice touch. The digital track has the restored stereo surround encoded Dolby track, and what you're really getting this for is the AC3 rendering on the analog right. And the analog track 1 has a mono folded down version of Rozsa's score, kind of isolated. I think some effects creep in here and there, but I just kind of sample bits and pieces of it. And it actually sounds quite good, even though it is a analog mono track. Now, the special features are quite extensive. Here's the cast and credits list with the special thanks. And here you get the start of a beautiful, you get the Janine Basinger essay, because the back is kind of taken up by all the other text. And here is a listing of all the additional audio program in the special features section, basically telling you, you're going to have the digital track playing one thing, the video doing one thing, and then both analog tracks are taken up by various audio pieces. So you're going to have to sit there and play with your remote and re-listen to the same sections on the other analog track or digital track to actually hear all of the supplementals. They just had to fit them in there by cramming them into all 3 tracks. So this is a nice breakdown showing you how to get to the various pieces. It's basically a mixture of old press footage and on-set footage with some new interviews, which is very nice that they did that, because none of this material had really ever been covered or documented, especially outside of, dusty old film text. And, you've got some interview footage with Chuck Heston and, various people who worked on the production, who knew Bronston and Mann, and it's actually a really nice supplemental section. Some of this stuff was replicated on the eventual DVD release from about 5 or 10 years ago, and but not all of it. So the Criterion still has some exclusive stuff. Now, the rear cover goes to their more, I hate to say epic design, but this is what they started doing on some of their special editions, and then the later discs they made, where the entire back cover, instead of having the essay, would have it fully taken up with the special features blurb and then the description blurb and the title, and they tried to make it look a lot more fancy. So here it talks about, this is the 94 restoration. It has an AC3 track, the interviews, the television bits, and then the bits on Rozsa's score, and then all the photographs, and then the original trailer and reissue trailer. Now, this is the about the transfer here. The film was restored from the best available elements and originally would have played in 70mm large format with 6-track magnetic stereo. Now, the AC3 and ProLogic mixes are done right from that, and they're the same track, but the AC3 is discrete and has incredible dynamic range. I mean, I was shocked at how good it sounded. It will give any good home theater a workout, and it's a fantastic track, and it's mixed exactly the way it should be, and that's how all these big epic films used to be mixed. And it's really a shame that that art of, you know, mixing for grand theater halls and palaces, you know, with 5 gigantic stage channels across the front, and being able to mix for full dynamic magnetic tape, and being able to use that to spread across those entire large palace auditoriums is just, it's a lost art, and it's really something else. And this is one of the few audio versions on home video that really replicates that experience. So hands down, the AC3 is fantastic. The transfer is pretty good. It's actually a tad soft, but you know, that kind of gets chalked up to they didn't have the best materials to work with. It's very colorful, but some people have complained that the 94 restoration kind of made some tweaks here and there, and the color didn't necessarily always match original dye transfer Technicolor prints or what the original Roadshow 70mm release looked like. Of course, we have no knowledge of what those look like in this day and age because they're just not available. So the fact that after this, it finally came out on DVD in about 2006, and the transfer is okay. It's a little bit better because it's DVD, but it's also been ported to Blu-ray overseas and subjected to a crap ton of digital noise reduction, and looks really awful. It looks nothing like a large format film, especially one as epic as LC should be. So this film cries out for a new 4K scan at least, if not a higher generation, higher res 6K or 8K scan. It really deserves it. As far as the film itself, it is a bit more cerebral. It is a bit more arty. It's not quite as narrative driven as what you'd expect, you know. So if you compare this to Ben-Hur or Spartacus, or even earlier films like Quo Vadis, you know, you might come up a little bit disappointed, but it's really the score, the spectacle, the staging, and just the overall impact that will bowl you over. So I definitely recommend it to, you know, history buffs, film nerds, and people who love epic films, but I think most everybody would really get something out of it. It's impeccably well made on a scale and in such a way that we will never see again in this day and age, and the Criterion release is arguably the only good version on video you can actually pick up, because that DVD went out of print and it's never been put out on Blu-ray over here, and the European Blu-ray is awful. I mean, it's technically HD, so you can import it if you really desire, but those are your 3 choices, and out of the 3, the Criterion still has some exclusive features and has that fantastic AC3 track. So great, important release. Here's Spine number 320. This is the CAV reissue special edition of The Princess Bride. Of course, Criterion did it earlier in a CAV edition with a few features, and then a CLV movie-only version. But this was their revisit from the mid-90s, and it's just a beautifully done piece of work. I love the cover is gorgeous. The image they chose, the way they ran the typeface, and even with the film by Rob Reiner credit, it makes it look like an old fairy tale or an old printed book of adventure, which is just fantastic. And the Criterion banner just fits perfectly into it, and it's so subtle. This is really one of the better Criterion jackets, I think. The gatefold is also outstanding. The way it's printed, you get a note from the viewer, note to the viewer, actually, with notes by the original author, William Goldman. The essay is printed here across the entire jacket, which is just fantastic, and it's got the old style of printing to make it look like an old text, just like the actual background is like weathered parchment. Here you have the normal credits, cast, special thanks, and then the chapter listings. Now, the film's original Dolby Stereo encoded mix is on the digital tracks, and then analog track 1 and 2 are filled with 2 different commentaries, which are wonderful listens. And so if you're getting this and you don't have digital capability, you're going to be flat out of luck. So definitely make sure you can have digital playback. Otherwise, you'll just be hearing the commentary. But the track on this is wonderful, and I really preferred it to the 5.1 mixes on the later MGM DVDs and Blu-rays and such. So I was very happy to pick this up, and it sounded much better than the 5.1. Now here's the rear, and again, you know, this is after they had switched from their old classic format rear cover to just filling the whole jacket, and they keep with the same design with the sort of H parchment background. You get the transfer note that it's transferred right from the Dolby Magnetic Surround Master, and it was transferred in 1:8:5:1 because this is a wonderfully shot flat widescreen film, and it's just very, very well done, very elegantly laid out, not too busy or anything. But all this stuff, it used to be exclusive to this release, but now since Criterion has finally gotten the rights and reissued the film on Blu-ray, all of these features have pretty much been brought into the present and put out on the Criterion Blu-ray. Now, I haven't actually gotten to pick that up yet, so I haven't been able to compare the audio tracks, but I would presume they're the same because that does have the original 2.0 mix as well. But as I've stated in other cases where myself and others have found there are differences, that even on new Criterion reissues, sometimes the audio track they're provided is a bit overzealously cleaned up and is actually still inferior to older tracks. So you always have to get all your new copies and compare them to your old copies, no matter who the label or distributor is. So anyway, that's made the value of this, you know, come down a bit, but it's still not as common and much better than the older discs, because I actually had those first and they were pretty good for the time, but this just blew them out of the water. The picture quality is really, really nice. The color's great. It's got plenty of sharpness, and the sound is wonderful. And it still has all the exclusive features. So again, if you have the Blu-ray, you don't necessarily need this, but it's just so beautifully packaged. Why wouldn't you? And you know, if you're patient enough, it can be had for, you know, not too much money, but it's just a gorgeous cover, definitely frameable, and it's just one I go back to a lot. Here's Spine 327. This is the Criterion release of Supercop, which is a really nice cover, even though it is a bit cheesy and stylized and such. Of course, Supercop is the American release version of Police Story 3, which is one of Jackie Chan's most epic all-out action films. Supercop was released in the States by Miramax, as they did many other Jackie Chan films here. Of course, that means it was recut, shortened, and then a brand new English dub was made where Jackie came in and re-recorded all his lines in English. And really, I wouldn't recommend any of the American versions. There's so many Hong Kong films and Chinese films that I've been dying to see for a long time, and I've been specifically waiting to see them in their original forms however I can, even if the transfer isn't the greatest, because they just flow so much better. I saw part of this when I was a kid, and I just couldn't really get into it. And then when I saw Police Story 1 and 2 in their original forms, I then came to Police Story 3 and thought it was going to be like Supercop, but found it was much more enjoyable in its original form. So this wasn't one I had intended on picking up. I thought it was kind of cool Criterion even got a Jackie Chan film. I kind of wish they had gone ahead and somehow gotten the rights to actually do Police Story 3 instead, and then done some of the other Jackie Chan films. But at least somebody put out a serious disc and transfer of a Jackie Chan film in some form to give him some level of respect. So at least that is worthwhile. And the disc itself is great. You know, the transfer is quite nice, licensed from Miramax. It has a Dolby Surround encoded digital track. It has a Dolby AC3 mix. Neither of those were really in the Hong Kong version. I can't remember if the original Hong Kong version of Police Story 3 was still mono only, or if it had a stereo mix. I just can't remember for certain. But, technically this is superior to what you would have gotten on versions of the Hong Kong edition. And the picture's nice, but of course it is the US cut with the US English dub. So you have to know what you're getting into. Just realize when you pick this up, it's the American version and not the original Police Story 3 edition. It doesn't really have any special features, so it was really just that you were getting the film in a nice transfer. I did forget, it actually does have the original Cantonese audio on the analog track 1. So I believe that's a mono. The original Cantonese mono is on there. But again, it's conformed to the US edit. So Police Story 3 in its original form is a bit longer. So I had forgotten that. So you can actually watch this with the Cantonese. But then, of course, because this was originally an American version, you're without subtitles, so you're going to have to watch the film in its original language, cut to 91 minutes, without subtitles. So I had actually forgotten that. That's kind of a wacky way to watch the film, but I guess if you know every in and out of it, you're kind of okay. But anyway, it was just really nice to see a proper release of a Jackie Chan film. I just wish it was the original Police Story 3 version. But you do get a nice essay, and again, it was just nice to see Jackie Chan treated with some respect here in the States. Here's Spine 335. This is the Criterion release of Shine. Now, this is a little dinged up, and the cover, I guess, got some water on it at some point, so it's a little ruffled. But this is a more common Criterion release because this was a big, award winner from the 90s, and they got the rights to do it in conjunction with the standard releases. So I haven't seen the standard release, so I don't know if it uses the same transfer. I would assume it probably does, but still, it's a nice way to see this film. Gets the Criterion treatment. The jacket looks lovely using the original poster image. And it's actually a pretty good film. It had been a long time since I'd seen it, so it still plays pretty well, even though it is kind of one of those that's more, you can tell this was going to get nominated for a lot of awards when you watch it. In terms of special features, you don't get a whole lot. You do get an audio commentary, which is nice, and you get a couple little other interviews and at the end, and I think a tiny bit of text and a couple photos, and then you get the Dolby surround encoded PCM track, and you get a Dolby AC3 mix. So if you have an RF decoder, you can listen to it in AC3. The standard release also came in a DTS version, so that is out there if you're wanting that or you're wanting a better audio track. But this is a nice release, and you get some a couple nice extras thrown in and a commentary track. So it's a nice, easy Criterion to pick up. It's super cheap, and again, it was just nice for them to be able to get a modern title at the time. Here is Spine number 343, Breaking the Waves, directed by Lars von Trier. A pretty nice and interesting jacket. It's very striking and different. And I think it does a very good job at getting across the feeling that you get when you're actually watching this film. And the black goes right into the Criterion banner, so it all kind of flows, even though it does have this kind of multiple split design. It does have a gatefold, which is quite nicely done. The essay is placed on the inside, and you get a nice overlapping background photo. I don't really know how visible that's going to come across. The About the Transfer is tucked in here. Then you get a selected filmography of Lars von Trier, who was not as well known as he would become among film circles here in the States. This was due to, I guess this was kind of when the whole Dogma 95 thing was kind of getting underway that he kind of spearheaded. So that kind of led him to become more prominent. Now, the rear also kind of falls in line with the way Criterion was starting to do their rear covers, except they put the chapter listing on the back instead of containing it inside the gatefold. So in terms of special features, you get 4 deleted scenes, and then you get the European director's cut of the film instead of it being a cut or censored version. I think here in the States it was trimmed a little bit. I don't think it was very much. You get some promo footage in the original US trailer, and then the transfer was director approved. Now, the soundtrack is Dolby Surround encoded on the digital tracks. It does not have AC3, but it also has a analog version of the soundtrack as well. So a nice little supplemental section, because the film actually runs pretty much onto the end of side 3, and then you get the supplement. So a nice release, and it's not super common, so it can be a little pricey. But of course, you can get this on DVD and now Blu-ray with most of the extras just kind of replicated. I don't think there's anything still exclusive to this. But you know, it's nice to have a later Criterion release and see what it looks like when they you know, put out a more modern art film and in a Laserdisc package. Here is Spine number 353, one of the all-time great comedies. I'm of course referring to Monty Python's Life of Brian, which I think is their indisputable masterpiece. As much as I love Holy Grail, this film is on another plane entirely. It uses the original poster artwork lovingly on a Laserdisc jacket, and it kind of lets the sides kind of fade off into black. You have the Criterion logo here. Now this is the special edition, which has a beautiful gatefold. The essay is placed in here, and then you have photos of each of the pythons along the top banner. The production credits are here with the special thanks, and thanks also to, tucked in here. The chapter listing is placed inside the gatefold, and then the film makes it onto, it's actually just on 2 sides, so it is CLV, and then it runs into the supplementals, which include everything from some deleted scenes, and then it actually includes a documentary entitled The Pythons, which is actually a pretty good older documentary. I think it may have originally been made for the BBC or a TV airing back in the day, I think like in the early 90s or something. So it's actually a pretty good and very informative documentary. So I think that's why they chose to include it. Now the rear also has the revised rear cover design where they use the whole jacket, and it kind of keeps in the period setting of the film, so that perfectly flows with the gatefold design. Now the film is transferred to 185, and it has the original Dolby Stereo track on the digital tracks. The analog tracks have 2 commentaries, so again you'll need digital playback to actually watch the film. The commentaries are really great and are exclusive to the Criterion releases. This was ported to Criterion DVD, and then they lost the rights. So if you want the Criterion features, you'll have to pick up the DVD or this Laserdisc. Now, the transfer itself, this film, you know, was produced on, you know, a smaller budget. They had a lot of financing trouble until at the last minute, George Harrison stepped in and just financed the whole film himself. The sound mixing, you know, is not going to be the greatest. It's very monocentric. So a lot of the later versions, the Sony versions, remixed the film into 5.1. And although they did a picture restoration that's, you know, very vibrant and sharp, I'm not really a fan of what they did I'm not really a fan of what they did to the color timing, and then the sound is just, it's pretty much mono spread out to 5.1, and I was very happy that the original Dolby Stereo on here sounds much better. It's much more integrated. It's never going to be super dynamic or very impressive, but I felt it was easier to understand the dialogue, a lot of which can be very, you know, thick. They use a lot of accents, of course, for all the various characters, and it can be very difficult to follow along with what's actually being said. I think some of the audio recording on the set was probably not the greatest back in 78, 79. And so it can be very difficult to actually hear the soundtrack, especially if you're watching some of the later versions on just, you know, TV speakers or soundbar. So the sound on here is excellent. The color is excellent. I much prefer the look and feel of this to the later versions, even though this is really unrestored. It can be a little soft in the transfer, but that's kind of inherent to the source material. So it's just a really great presentation with the original audio mix and some exclusive features that are pretty nice, and just a really nice jacket where they kind of went the extra mile for this comedy milestone. So if you can't pick this up, you can get the Criterion DVD, which is usually readily available online. It's not super expensive. And of course the Sony Blu-ray finally came back into print, so you can pick that up for the Sony extras. Now here's Spine number 354, which is Time Bandits, the Terry Gilliam film, so it's kind of fitting. I've got this after Life of Brian. I picked this up in a lot. It's a little dinged up and it has some old stains on the cover, But that aside, it's just a beautiful rendering of the original artwork. I love the way they did this, and I think it works a lot better than other covers that used the original artwork. They usually didn't get the full range of color, and they kind of like cropped it to different sizes and such. And the Criterion banner just looks great across the top, really contrasts with the blue. Now this is a single disc title, so it's not really going to have a whole lot of special features or anything. It's really just, it has a commentary by Terry Gilliam, which is more scene specific. It's not a complete running commentary, but it's a nice listen. And you get a really nice essay printed here and a very whimsically done cover design that, you know, kind of goes with the whimsical nature of the film. It's the best way to put it. And you get the credits and the transfer notes. The original soundtrack mix, the Dolby Stereo 2.0, is on here in PCM, and it sounds wonderful. I think it sounds much better than the various 5.1 tracks. Now, Criterion put the film out on Blu-ray. It's also come out on Blu-ray overseas by Arrow, put it out in the UK. It's been issued on DVD and Blu-ray a multitude of times, so there's tons of different versions, and some people like one over another. But I will say, this Laserdisc, I was quite surprised when I put it on. The picture quality on this is outstanding. In a lot of ways, you'd swear it's a CAV disc. This is a wonderfully done title. It's one of the best looking Criterion discs, one of the best looking Laserdisc period that I own. And still, it's one of my favorites to just pull out and throw on. Of course, you know, when you get into Laserdiscs that are kind of on the higher end of picture quality, you know, you're going to need to look at a lot of different ones to know, you know, how good they can look, and, you know, what is, you know, if you're set up, make color a transfer, you know, so you need to understand it's never going to be the greatest, most pristine looking thing in the world, but this is a really nice transfer. It's rather sharp, it's got great color, you know, nice detail, and the soundtrack is original and sounds wonderful. So it's a really nice Laserdisc to have. It's a great Criterion disc, great transfer, even though it's kind of light in the extras department. Here you go to Spine 357, which is the unbearable lightness of being. Really lovely cover. This is actually glossy on the whole jacket is glossy, so it really makes that cover image kind of pop out, and it's just really striking. So I love what they did with this. Of course, rendered the Criterion banner in blue. Get a nice gatefold with the essay printed across the first side. Again, the inner is also glossy, so it really gives a element of prestige to the jacket. The film goes across 3 sides, and you get your production credits and the audio track information. You get the digital soundtrack, has the film soundtrack, and you get a commentary on track 1, and then you get an analog backup track on track 2. Now here's the rear, and they kind of broke up the rear cover with the different color bars, so it does look kind of nice. It's a bit kind of weird when you first look at it, but it kind of works in a way, I think. Of course, this is a longer film. You don't really get any special features outside of the commentary. It's just, you know, it was a brand new transfer done in 185. It was, you know, director approved, and you get a the sound was mastered right off of the master material. So it's just a nice release of a more modern kind of, I don't know if to say it was a more modern art house classic, but it was, you know, certainly well known by this time, and it was nice to have a proper widescreen remastered version of this. Of course, it's a later Criterion release. It's not super common. Of course, it's come out on DVD, and you know, so this has really been supplanted by later versions. But it's a nice release to have, and the jacket's nice and glossy, so you can definitely tell a lot of care and time went into making this look nice. And finally, my last Criterion is Spine number 359, which is The Night Porter. It's a very striking and bold cover image. Of course, this film is extremely notorious, and, you know, was banned in a lot of places, and is not for the faint of heart to watch. So, you know, it's a really striking image. I think it's actually well done for conveying, you know, what the film is about, and for drawing the eye, and also keeping it stylistic and in touch with the tone of the film. You get the Criterion banner across the top. So I definitely like what they did with the design. I think it's the best cover the film's had. I actually like this better, much better than the Criterion Blu-ray cover. Now, this doesn't have a whole lot of, actually I don't even know if this has any special features, but you get a nice essay here, and they keep the design from the front on the rear. Of course, it's a widescreen. It has the original mono mix in PCM, which is great. The analog track is just the mono mix again as well. So basically this was just getting a fresh, proper transfer of the film in widescreen with digital sound. No real special features or anything, and Criterion did it on DVD, and now they have a restored Blu-ray out with special features, so you can pick that up if you really want to see the film and delve into some extra bonus material. But again, this was just a nice Criterion release where they were getting the film out in its proper ratio with its original soundtrack with a good transfer, and just a really nice, interesting disc package, I think. This is not very, very common. The later on you get in Spine titles, the rarer they're going to get. So I just picked this up in a lot locally a couple years ago. And it's been a little while since I've watched this film. It's not one that you pull out all the time. But I'll have to rewatch it and really look at the transfer, and I've been meaning to look at picking up the Blu-ray anyway. So that's Spine 359. And that's the last of my Criterion discs I currently have. Now I'm going to show you my couple of Roan Group discs. Of course, the Roan Group kind of started in a Criterion fashion, and they became kind of an alternative to Criterion. They never achieved the same market saturation, really, and so their discs are, these days, much more uncommon and can be quite rare and get very, very pricey. But they were basically trying to operate with the same lofty ideals as Criterion, and they kind of made it over into the DVD era and still exist in various shapes or forms to this day. But Roan releases were done with a lot of care and attention to detail, so anytime I've come across one, I try to pick it up. Here is the Roan release of Night Train to Munich, the Carol Reed picture, which is a great classic that's not talked about enough these days. He uses an original, it looks like a British quad poster, kind of strikingly put across the Laserdisc jacket. You get the Roan Group banner across the top. Now this is pretty much just a movie-only disc, but it was the first really good release of the film you could get on video here in the States. It's digitally encoded, so you get the mono mix and PCM, which is great. You get a nice Criterion-style essay here and the chapter listings. So it's just a nice release and the first really good release of a great classic film. And of course it's since been kind of restored and everything, so this is really, kind of made obsolete. But it's really nice to find and not very common and can be very pricey. Like I said, most Roan discs are so uncommon these days that practically all of them you're going to have to pay a bit of money for. Here's the Roan release of Scrooge, A Christmas Carol, which is the Alistair Sim version that many people adore. It's a nice bonus that has a Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer cartoon from the Max Fleischer studio that supposedly, I believe, is transferred from a transfer Technicolor element. This looks quite nice, and you definitely get the holiday theming with this jacket. I actually picked it up, it was still sealed. Again, this disc can get quite pricey. It's not very common, but it's a really nice nice release of this film. And I think one of the first good ones it had. It's digitally encoded, so you get the PCM mono, which is great. And you get a nice little small essay about the film. You get the chapter stops and a Leonard Maltin quote. So definitely nice if you want this film on Laserdisc or you're a fan of this version of A Christmas Carol. But of course, it's been superseded by DVDs and such. So still nice to have. Now this is the big one for me. It was actually a disc I wanted for a long time. It's one of my favorite films of all time, and it's just so rare and usually expensive that I didn't think I'd ever be able to find it. And I always wondered if it was the source of the Universal DVD that was the last release of this film in America. It's been out of print here since 1999, which baffles me, because it should be much more well known. It's a beloved British classic, so in Britain they know this film. Here in the States you get nothing but blank stares because studios are stupid. Anyway, I'm talking about the 1965 film, The Ipcress File, which in my estimate is the greatest spy film ever made. It is the Harry Saltzman produced first film in the Harry Palmer series, which is, for me, Michael Caine's quintessential performance, his great classic role, you know, in addition to Get Carter. But this is the one that does it for me, and it took me years to finally see this. It's very interesting because Harry Saltzman co-produced all of the early Bond films, and he started doing this as a side project, and Palmer was labeled, you know, and sold as the thinking man's alternative to James Bond, the working class spy who's downtrodden, and there is no romance to being a spy in this gritty world. So it's much more realistic and much more about actual spying than Bond was, particularly the films. The Roan jacket is using the original artwork, which is very lovingly done. It's a glossy jacket, which is great, and you get the widescreen banner on the bottom. Now the rear cover is very nicely done. It has a nice usage of imagery from the film here in the backdrop, and then these are from what seem to be original lobby cards, as they have the off color that you would get on older vintage lobby cards and press kit materials, even back in the 60s. So that's quite nice. I've seen these images in a lot of books. I remember this one particularly because it took me so long to see the film. I wanted to see it even as a kid, and I would see images like this, and that just furthered my desire to finally see it. It's just a single CLV movie-only disc. It does have the original monomix and PCM, which is great. The color is very nice and rather warm, so I believe this is the source of the Universal DVD, which is a bit warmer in its color timing than the later HD Master that's available in Britain. Network has reissued it with all their old extras and a lossless mono track. So if you want the film, please import the Network Region B Blu-ray. Just make sure you have region-free capability. It's a great release, and you can have it for very, very cheaply. But you have to have region-free capability. Here in the States, you're stuck with tracking down an expensive Laserdisc or DVD, and that's it. This is finally in widescreen, which is a godsend. This film should never be seen pan and scan. It has a very intricate photography style. The film is shot in Technoscope, allowing them to shoot scope cheaply and use spherical lenses to get very sharp images and cram cameras in very tight and strange places to really give this sense of paranoia and to maintain that throughout the entire film as Harry Palmer goes way down into a rabbit hole. The story is labyrinth. It's very much what you would get from reading the original Lynn Dighton novel or reading John le Carre. You know, it's much more two-fisted, relying on the character has to rely on his wits and absolutely nothing else. And it also has I've always felt Dighton had a very I wouldn't say debt, but you could definitely feel the indebtedness to Raymond Chandler, just as you could in Fleming's writing. Seemed a lot of English authors took Chandler far more seriously. Chandler was always taken more seriously in Europe. Even before his death, he was finally getting some critical recognition over there. So you basically get, you know, a sense of the older, hard-boiled detective fiction, even in the film adaptation of Dayton's novel. So again, I could gush about this film for hours, and John Barry's score is arguably his finest work, and it sounds wonderful in the original mono mix. There's a later 5.1 remix on the Blu-rays, which you just shouldn't even bother with. So it's a wonderful presentation. Like I said, it's a bit more colorful than the later HD versions, so there is that to consider. But this is a very expensive disc to track down. The DVD is as well. The big thing for this disc is they were able to record a commentary with director Sidney J. Furie and the editor Peter Hunt, and that's been carried over onto the DVD and the various Blu-rays. So it debuted here on the Roan release, and so yeah, I think it's even been uploaded to YouTube if you really want to hear it. So again, this has really been kind of made obsolete. The real reason you want to pick it up is if you're a huge ipcress fan like I am, or a huge Harry Palmer fan, or a big Michael Caine fan, or you just stumbled across it for cheap. I was very lucky to finally find a copy on eBay that wasn't too expensive, so I finally rolled the dice to actually be able to see this film on Laserdisc and look at the transfer. So again, if you've never seen this film, absolutely do so. It's an absolute must. It's one of the best films of the 60s. It's a quintessential British classic. I think it's it's definitely my favorite Michael Caine performance. It's one of my favorite films of all time. The soundtrack is absolutely incredible, and this film shares many of the key personnel from the original Bond films, because Harry Saltzman produced it, and many of them kind of crossed over and worked on this in various capacities. So it's really interesting to see a serious Bond alternative produced and made by many of the same personnel of the Bond series at the same time. Of course, this film was released in 1965, the same year as Thunderball. So theoretically, you could have gone to 2 different theaters and seen these films. They were kind of staggered. I think ipcress came out first, but you know, it was possible to see both these films in the same year, and you could actually watch them back to back now if you're really curious to look at the differences. But this is just an incredible film. I could keep gushing about it for hours. I wish it was more well known, and hopefully one day Criterion or somebody will get the rights to it and actually release it here in the States, because as of right now it's been out of print here in the US for almost 20 years, which is absolutely ridiculous. So again, a really fantastic Laserdisc. I'm so happy I finally found it, but if you're going to try and track this down, this is the one to go for, and it's definitely going to cost you quite a bit. Well, those are my only Roan discs. So as I said, you know, they're very uncommon and can go for quite a lot of money because they're very rare. That's going to do it for the this section of my Laserdisc collection. And thanks for watching through all of my rambling on Criterion and Roan discs. And I'm going to continue on with the last couple of videos I have to do before I'm going to jump into the new arrivals batch that I've been kind of building up since I started making these videos, and that may have to be in a couple parts. So thanks for watching, and hope you stay tuned for the next installment.